Well. Today, we're going to be talking about behind the scenes for the LP series. So if you haven't finished watching that adventure, or, still don't want to be spoiled on how that goes, definitely go check that out first. I put this video at the end of the LP playlist so that people can sort of have a nice cool down. I hope you enjoyed the finale and everything that sort of came out throughout that. And I kind of want to talk to you all a bit about my thinking behind a lot of this and how it was made, because it's really been quite an extraordinary project. So right now I'm in game, but most of this video is actually going to be revolving around this, which is a notepad file. I do a lot of my kind of loose scripting and bullet pointing and note preparation in Notepad. And this is a really long notepad file, as you can see. I'll scroll through it here, which is basically the framework for the whole series as I originally devised it before the series came out. So a lot of this work is actually not, we're currently in 2019, as the series just ended at the start of 2019. The series was running through 2018, but a lot of this notepad you're looking at, actually, this was written and scripted and scheduled up at the end of 2017. This is actually quite old now, and most of the information here is what I followed to a T in producing the videos right up until this one just earlier on in this week. There have been some edits as time's gone on, and we'll talk about those as they come up. But basically, yeah, everything from the human departing at Claw Island, from all the characters we were playing, every single story branch decision we made, nearly every single one, was all already written down. And this notepad is actually the reason that inspired me to make the Let's Play. So I want to run through it and talk to you guys about what was happening here, and I can go into further discussion about the story productions as well. So I will just say as well, a lot of reasons for this LP existing I've already talked about. I made a video right before the series came out explaining that the story is really good nowadays in Living World Season 4 and beyond. And I really want to kind of be able to do casual, comfortable LP-style videos for people instead of regurgitating them in a highly edited format that just isn't worth the time, right? But then if I wanted to LP the recent stuff, then it would feel weird to skip Season 3, and then it would feel weird to skip Heart of Thorns, and we went all the way back to the LP. You guys hopefully remember that video. I remember making that, even though that's a year ago now. I remember making that video like it was yesterday. It's so clear to me, and all that motivation is still exactly the same. But these were things I'd actually been thinking about months even before then, in 2017. And what really worried me was doing the personal story. Not because I actually think the personal story is quite poor in its story delivery in a lot of ways. Not because the personal story is definitely poor in terms of gameplay. Like, for example, one of the most boring bits of the series, as I can see from feedback from you guys, is when I talk about skills and traits. And I talk about builds, and I talk about runes and stuff, and sigils. People don't really like that in the LP in general. Some of you did, I acknowledge that. But in general, a lot of people didn't enjoy those moments where I was talking about that stuff. And I have to ask why, because that stuff's actually really cool and really deep and really intricate, and exactly what Guild Wars 1 players should be looking for and claim to have lost in the sequel when it's totally not been. Why do people not like that? Because it's not needed for Guild Wars 2, because the gameplay is really poor, right? So there's these things I really don't like about the personal story, but it was necessary for me to play it. So the only way I could justify it is with this notepad file. I had to find a way through that would present it in a really exciting way, cover all the most important details, and be short enough to be viable as a Let's Play. Now, I know that sounds ironic because we were 122 episodes down the line before it ended. That's kind of cheaty as well. There's more than 122 episodes because the bonuses are not included in that, and there's quite a few of those. I know that sounds rich, but the personal story and Guild Wars 2 is so much more than even what you saw there. There's a lot of other story branches that just aren't that interesting, or just aren't that well implemented, or that essential, that I actually had to choose how I would cull those away. There's a lot of stuff between personal story, such as leveling, alright? This series, I had to make a concession right at the start that there would be no leveling up in it. And I know, instantly, for a moment, that a lot of people will have tuned out of this Let's Play because it's not a leveling Let's Play. And when people sit down to watch someone play a game, they kind of want the complete experience. And immediately with Guild Wars 2, you don't, my series here, you don't get that complete experience because I had to cull that off. But I knew that was essential because we have so many hours of content here. And if I'd included leveling and all that other stuff, it would have been insane, like truly insane, to include like all the open world meta events and stuff. If we scroll down to the bottom of the notepad here, I did actually thumb out, way back when this was created, my general idea of how many episodes it would be. And I totted it all up right at the end, and you'll see my original pegging for the series was to have 108 main episodes and 17 bonus, which is very, very, very close to the total that we came out in the end. So I was actually very close to my goal and my understanding for how long this would be. And to me, that is a short Guild Wars 2 LP compared to what it could be. Let alone, I mean, there is another totally different style of LP where you have a bunch of mates playing it casually and just chatting with one another, and that's got leveling in as well, and it's more about the personalities behind the people playing. I've never really seen that be executed super well. But as you guys know, that's not really necessarily my jam with it. But anyway, so that's what the challenge of the personal story was. I wrote this notepad, and I really got excited by what I'd done. I really got excited by, oh, we can play the human up to this point, and then we can cut, and then I can introduce the char, and I could do this char story and this char story, and so on and so on. And it worked brilliantly. My whole motivation when choosing story steps at first was behind cohesion. What do I mean by that? I mean, I wanted to be completionist about it, and I wanted to have everything really important involved. But the most important things to me were making sure repeat characters had their dues. When you saw a character, I wanted you to know where they came from and all the places that they had been before. So Explorer Kekt is a beautiful example to me. Some players can go through, and this isn't an uncommon rare thing, some people can go through Guild Wars 2 not seeing Kekt at all, or only seeing Kekt right as he dies. Well, I mean, no, everyone kind of does see Kekt. He's in some actual backbone missions that everybody coalesces to. But nonetheless, you can barely see Kekt or understand Kekt. But hopefully, the people watching and listening to me right now don't have that experience, because I set it up so that you saw Kekt every single possible opportunity. So when he dies in that atrocious Fergan mission at the end, in that horror mission with a boss fight that's not really a boss fight, when he dies and Fergan stands back up and slays him, hopefully you actually felt something, or you knew the significance of it at the very least. And so that was the idea. I tried to do that as much as possible, and I think largely you should know every single personal story character. The only ones that slip by are a small group of characters that are in a single mission within a mission that appear in the celebrations in Fort Trinity at the end. But I think the whole point of the writers doing that is to show that these are big, important characters, even though you barely got to interact with them. So I don't mind that my series kind of did that in the way that it did it. The other one I think maybe was a little bit poor was the Gear Grind Warband. And a lot of the Norn stuff was kind of iffy. But Norn we'll get to at the end. Norn was always supposed to be a big surprise. And so what I tried to do with Norn is whenever there was a Norn relevant thing, and, you know, the Gear Grind Warband, I think I'm talking about the right Warband right now, are a part of that. But like the Havrun to Bear and stuff, and Fergan too, whenever a Norn thing came up, I tried to just like slip a little comment in the commentary that was sort of hinting at, oh, there might be more here. Like, I would act blasé and uninterested in the Norn threads. And the idea of that is, I was hoping that people would kind of get a feel that I was teasing them and playing with them as the series was going along. Maybe some of you guys got that, maybe some of you didn't. But also, on a second playthrough, that stuff, second watch through, that stuff should be quite apparent, actually. A lot of stuff will be, in fact. So, for example, Deborah reappearing, that was always planned, and we'll see that in a second. So if you watch the series again, when we free Deborah from the cage, I like make an idle comment like, oh, you know, she might end up having a greater role to play than us, blah, 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 and then moves on. And she kind of does in the end, right? She's there with the pack supporting them in their biggest offensives in awe. What does Casey do, right? So, you know, there's a lot of that stuff. Anyway, so, yeah, let's talk about, again, the principles behind the series. First, I needed some stuff to motivate me, so this is where the whole notepad started genuinely. I was like, what would make someone watch in 2018 personal story? Because it's old to them, and people are, no offense to people, but they have, especially not those of you watching this video, but a lot of people have very short attention spans, and if there's something newer out, they don't care anymore. They think that games get bad just because they get old, and that's not true at all. I don't believe that whatsoever. I believe you acclimate to the graphics and the control schemes that are presented to you, and good design is good design forever. You could go back to games in the early 2000s, in the late 90s, the early 90s, at any point, and good games are good games. That's what I believe, but you don't get views, you don't get interest on things that are perceived as old, and unfortunately, 2012 is already viewed as old. Scary stuff, right? So I needed to be excited about it enough myself to believe other people would be. So I wrote these up. Well, one asset would be doing really good graphics and making sure reshade was good. I actually had an idea of tweaking my reshade every episode to, you know, really make each map look perfect. You can actually, with a tool called Guild Wars 2 Hook, you can refine the fog in and out as well. And I was planning on messing with the fog too. One particular moment I wanted to mess with the fog was right at the end of the adventure in the Zaitan instance. But I never did in the end, and it looked a little bit weird. I never did this whole thing in the end, which you'll see why in a second. But I did have max graphics and reshade. I just didn't tweak them. So something to be excited about. Story journal coverage. A lot of people, that's an alien part of the game that they don't really pay any attention to. So that's like a value add for me. Good storyboarding. That's what I've been rambling about this entire time. If I can plot it out in a concise but good way that really draws out what's beautiful about the story. Because it is beautiful. I believe quantity is a quality all in its own. I really do. And I think the personal story has that in spades if you weave through it the right way. And by doing a Let's Play series, I can get you to weave through the story in a way that would be impossible as a player. No player would get to where I got on the human and then swap to a char, and then get to where we got on a human on a char and then swap to an Asura, only to then go back to the human, only to then go back to this create a whole new character altogether, the Sylvari, only to then surprise themselves with a Norn at the end. No one would do that, right? But I can do that in a series, and so that's a value add. Fashion Wars, changing each chapter. This I feel I did okay with in the end. But I sort of feel like I messed up. The early episodes are really important, right? In a series like this. People decide if they're going to tune in or out. And the very first Fashion Wars I did, I was very blasé about. I was thinking about that as a bit further down the road. So we, like, set Casey up. And I, like, died him quite blasé in my normal gameplay mannerisms, not thinking about the series enough. And I actually got quite a lot of negative response about the way that Casey looked at the start. And I think I might have turned some people off of the series, because to them, playing Barbie is really important and they can't handle ugly characters. I did get some comments like that. And there's kind of a rule. If you get a comment about something, it tends to be that there's other like-minded people who thought it but just weren't rude enough or invested enough to say it, right? You know, depending on the force of the comment. So yeah, I think I kind of messed up, because I think this was a really good thing we did in the end. But I probably, in the most trafficked videos, the early ones, I think I might have set up a sense to people that I wasn't very good at this bit. But by the end, I think it was alright, and I got to show off all the cultural stuff. This was quite expensive in the end as well when it came to the Norn. Because a lot of this stuff I already had unlocked, but on the Norn I didn't. We'll get to later. So a fun rule set. So this is actually kind of like a different section here. Basically, usually when I do a series, if I think it's not good enough on its own, I'll do some kind of like gameplay challenge. The Guild Wars 1 series did this a lot, and I was happy to do that again. So, we'll look. Oh, here you go. These are the rules here. So that's a value add, doing something special, not just running through really lazily. Let's actually make the game shine, because the way that Guild Wars 2 is structured now, it's really easy, and you don't sort of capture the spirit of what it's trying to do. So we'll try and make it a real game, basically, is the idea here. Next, minimal open world screen time, keeping the series short enough to exist. I think when I first wrote this, that really meant you're not going to see anything. I distinctly remember when we were in the Queensdale episodes, the Shadow Behemoth stuff. My mind at that point, as dictated by this notepad, was really we weren't going to show it much at all. And I don't think we were going to show many. In the end, I kind of went a bit crazy with the series in terms of open world stuff and showed a lot more than I was originally planning to. Like the 3 dragons, I think I'd already planned. We'll see on the notepad. But some of those other things, you know, I tried my best to get those in the end. I think my original envisioning of the series was that open world would be way more minimal than it was in the end. There's a version of this series where every single second in the open world you can kind of cut out, and it's just the instances. I didn't do that though, obviously. That would create a weird fractally nature of the game, I think. Opening with vistas and Guild Wars one-shots. So, yeah, this never came to be the Guild Wars one-shots. But value add. This one was really important to me as well. For some reason, all this other stuff just wasn't clicking much. But this did click to me. Oh, I can open each episode with a vista. That's so cool. Awesome. And I was thinking as well, one series people have always wanted me to do is talk about like an area of the world and how it changed from Guild Wars 1 to Guild Wars 2. And a few people have done projects like this in the past, but they've not been as their platforms aren't as big as I'm fortunate enough to have, right? Like, I reach a ton of people when I do stuff, and unfortunately these other projects haven't kind of had that reach. Where basically you take like a screenshot of an exact area, and then it like crossfades into that exact area in Guild Wars 2. And I was thinking I could do that with vistas. You open with a Guild Wars 2 vista, but the first half of the vista is how it looked in Guild Wars 1, and then it crossfades in. I dropped this though, because it quickly became apparent to me that logging in and out of Guild Wars 1 all the time was really frustrating. I could use Toolbox to kind of cheat and not have to worry about a lot of stuff, but it was an element that got removed, not just because the Guild Wars 1 bouncing was frustrating, but because on episode 1, when it came to this part of the episode production, which happens at the end of every episode, I do everything and then I splice those other things around. When it came to that, I had a really cool idea that just came to me in the middle of the episode, was not in the notepad. And that was, hold on, as I was walking to get the vista, some of the NPCs near me started speaking, and I just stood near them. And then when I put the video file in, I was like, hold on, I can splice their audio over the vista, and I can even transition, instead of into a Guild Wars 1 shot, I can crossfade into these NPCs talking. And I did it, and the effect was really nice, and I did it, like, instantly. It was such a nice effect, and also it was time efficient, okay? It meant that I can have the vista transitions into something else, but without having to boot up Guild Wars 1 and do all of that stuff. And the last reasoning there as well was, well, look, it's a Guild Wars 2 series, and in some ways I did want to, you know, look back at Guild Wars 1, and I talked about it, and where the sequel talks about it, but it's a new game, and I wanted to show off the new game, not show off more shots of places we'd explored before. So, yeah, and this had a massive response as well. The vistas with the dialogue, you guys adored. I guess, actually, I should do my whole discussion on that now, because it's not really going to appear in the notepad later. Listen, the other thing with this, though, is it became incredible work. Like, you guys really liked those, and I had such nice comment feedback on that. I really took to it, and I liked it as well, right? You know, I make the things I enjoy, right? That I myself would want to watch. So I did that, and it was okay around Queensdale. The devs seemed to have pretty consistent implementation for dialogue timings and frequencies and quantities. And it wasn't too hard to go online, research the area, and see what dialogue would come up, pick some favorites of mine, and then go to the region. But over time, this became really difficult, because you don't exactly know which group of NPCs are going to say exactly what you want to hear. You have no way of knowing the cooldown on how frequently they speak, and you have no way of knowing if when they speak, it's reliant on events in the area. And eventually it became very clear, very quickly, it became very clear to me, that the devs were wildly inconsistent about this. And sometimes I would be spending... this is not an exaggeration, and when you hear this, you're probably just going to be a bit flippant about it and move on. Hours per episode. Everything's done and ready to go, but I need to get the dialogue for the Vista shot. And so you're standing there AFK and you might think, oh, you're just AFK recording, waiting for NPCs to speak. But while you're AFK recording, like, you have to get to another PC to do anything meaningful, or, you know, reroute the audio through something else so it doesn't come through, so you can watch YouTube videos in the meantime. It just stalls the day, right? Hours. And it's just all this stalling where it's like, I want to really be meaningfully clear of this work that I'm doing today, this video that I'm making, and I can't be because I'm just waiting for this dialogue. And it's that frustration of never knowing it's coming. You know when you're, like, farming for a drop, and you've been doing it for ages and you still don't have it, and you get really depressed because the realization occurs to you that your odds are the same as they were when you started? It's that, right? It's so frustrating, and it kind of became a nightmare. Easily the least enjoyable part of making the whole series, but it was so good, the audio. And I've talked about this before on a stream a while ago. The first video I did where there wasn't any dialogue, like, someone commented saying, oh, there's no dialogue, like, and they seemed really crestfallen and, like, you know, upset that it wasn't there. And I was like, man, people are watching really keenly for that dialogue, and sometimes I'm spending more time waiting for the dialogue than the rest of the video was to shoot, not edit and all the other stuff, but just the shooting of it. I'm like, I've just dropped a second video file into this track, and it's the length of the video originally was, waiting for this dialogue. The other problem was, but people liked it, so I tried to get it in as much. There were only 3 or 4 episodes in the whole series that didn't have the dialogue in the end. at some place or another. If there wasn't around a Vista, I at least definitely made sure I'd listen to some as I was walking past. The other problem was, as the game goes along, from time crunch, it's so when you look at the real nitty-gritty of Guild Wars 2, you can see it all over the place. The quantity of dialogue just drops off all over the place. And so much story happens at Ore. Like, a huge amount of this series is the last chapter, Victory or Death. I don't mean the last instance, which is just the finale, but the last chapter, Victory or Death. And Ore does not have that much dialogue. Most of it is dynamic event dialogue, and they were completely bereft and creatively bankrupt by... bankrupt's the wrong word, I guess. They had nothing left for the dialogue in Ore. It's all totally generic stuff that you can copy-paste over any other event. And that was really, really getting to me. In fact, that slipped into the commentary on one of the Deborah episodes, actually. There's just nothing meaningful anywhere, so I kind of had a real job to find good stuff. And so the Orion episodes kind of are very light on that. And then lastly, short story integration. Now, I knew that there were some small short stories I wanted to do early, but nothing to the level that I eventually did. As the series went along, you saw I played with how I manufacture those. I used to do, like, scrolling, and, like, we're reading down the scroll, but in the end, I actually found the most time-efficient and best-looking way to do it was just a straight static image of, like, you know, some text that, you know, I edit on. Not too difficult. I set up a process using Google Drive for that, and it's actually something I've experienced in with other things, other Let's Plays I've done. I've like integrated short stories and stuff. Like Azuric, we did the manuals. I did that by actually physically taking pictures of the manual with my phone and editing them in, because the information is just not on the internet. Grimrock, they have their README with cool lore that most players missed, and we put in. So I had some understanding of this, and where the vistas and the audio was a bit bad, I would usually do a short story. By the end of the series, actually, I had found a way to plot out short stories for every episode. Like, the Norn branch of this series is, 12 episodes long or something? But every single bit of blog post lore about the Norn, all the short story pieces, all the stuff explaining about Dragon, about the totems of the wild and the have runes and so on, all of it is perfectly spaced out, so you get every drip of information. Some of it was a bit more wonky, like Lesser Races was when we really started with a lot of this. But we did some beautiful stuff there, like on the Skrit Lesser Race. I'm like implementing short stories about the Skrit to give you that lore. And then we transition back into like Sylvari lore, where they're dealing with with destroyers. Foul Lane deals with the destroyers, and like Edge of Destiny, and then the Skrit are dealing with the destroyers. Like the cohesion there was just amazing. I adored that. I didn't get anyone really notice that, but I thought that was really good. So yeah, short story integration. A beautiful thing happened after I wrote this notepad. That's that I got permission to do audiobooks, which this is not the time or place to talk about that. I am still planning on doing those in full, right? But I got permission to do that. I wouldn't be copyright struck against including that. So I immediately knew I wanted to integrate that into the LP. If I had known I would have Edge of Destiny perms at the start of the series, I think you would have seen this go a little bit differently and a lot more Edge of Destiny being involved. And we actually probably would have had something like the two stories going in parallel. I would have liked to have looked into the feasibility of that. Because even just reading the small sections of Edge of Destiny, and a good chunk of it's in the Let's Play, I've realised that book's not very long. I've realised in general books aren't very long. As long as I seem to remember when I was younger and reading a lot more. But anyway, so, I mean, reading books a lot more. So, yeah, that was really cool, and I mean, that led to some really nice stuff. I loved the last passage of short story integration in the entire game. The last one is the final chapter of Edge of Destiny, where Kaith is alone, and she's got no one. And I love juxtaposing that with everyone united at Ara moments later. You know, I loved being able to do things like that. When COF started, we got those last passages, those really grim moments for Ritlock and Logan as they're estranged, and then we go into the dungeon and we reunite them. It was very, very cool. This was really fun to do, and I hope people enjoyed that. It was only a little bit messy with the Lesser Race arcs, where we kind of had to cut them in between loading screens. The last thing I'll say, by the way, is as far as the notepad was concerned, the only short story I was 100% confident I needed to do was in the Sylvari arc with, not Malik, with Cadian. Now, you'll notice short stories don't appear until like 30, 40 episodes into the series. And that's because I'm quite cynical about people's attention spans. And I know that I want these at the start of videos, which is where people usually click off within, you know, they'll give me like 30 seconds of their time and then they'll leave. It's like hour-long production and they'll give me 30 seconds and they'll leave. So you got to grip them. So this is, I believe very much in boiling the frog, right? So basically, I want to get them invested in Casey. I want to get them invested in Tyrix. I want to get them invested in the characters and the stories. And then I force the lore on you later on, basically. And I say, no, now the episode starts and you have lore to listen to now. And it's drier, right? There's not so much going on. There's not pretty colors and moving images. It's text on a page. But believe me, it's worth it. That's what I'm implicitly saying. And I wanted to do that later. I think was fair to the viewer, though, in that I put the short stories at the beginning and the end, largely, as best I could. The reason for that is so that people can skip if they want. I believe people should have the convenience for that. That's got to be a good thing for me, right? But it was all going to start with canon. That was where it was essential because, as you guys know, in-game, and I mentioned this a lot in the Twilight Arbor dungeon, you get nothing of Cadian. What a beautiful story and a cool character. You get nothing. He's just a filler throwaway boss. One of the true lowlights. I mean, I could do a top 20 lowlights of the personal story. He would be somewhere near the Zaitan battle, the handling of Cadian. So bad. And I needed people to understand that. And you have to do short stories to get anything from Cadian. And as soon as that, the floodgates are open and we get short stories the rest of the way through. There's some other stuff here, some other value adds I ended up doing that aren't included. Like audio ducking. I had a few comments about audio as the series went along, and there are a couple of audio mistakes, definitely, from my editing software. There's a particular episode in Bloodtide Coast I remember was bad, and that was on my end. But largely, the game is terrible at handling audio. Dialogue volumes are all over the place. I did a lot of work. You're not going to believe this, but probably 80% of all the editing in the entire series is audio work. Is lifting, lowering commentary, shuffling commentary around so that it doesn't overlap with NPC dialogue. One thing, if anyone watching this who's ever tried to make a Let's Play, do me a favor, try and make a Guild Wars 2 Let's Play. What you'll find very quickly is this game is extremely difficult to LP because all the dialogue fires at random moments that you can't quite predict, like when dynamic events are going on or when personal stories going on. And you can't have a truly genius savant-like understanding of the timing of every bit of dialogue in every instance in a production like I'm doing here, right? Even if you do test plays of the missions, which isn't particularly viable unless you're taking multiple characters the whole way through the game in advance of the ones you're actually playing on. It's really hard to know when the dialogue is, so knowing when to shut up to let them speak is really tricky. And when dialogue can trigger at random behind you at a low volume while you're in the middle of discussing something, you're very likely to just talk over the NPCs fully. And that happens all the time, or you're going to talk over them a little bit, or they're just going to interrupt you. So most of the editing is raising the game's volume when it needs to be raised, raising the game's volume when I'm not speaking, but also just literally cutting my own voice away from audio, cutting words I say earlier out so I can shuffle the whole thing earlier so that I stop speaking by the time the NPC does, and then it starts again. You might be able to detect some of it. That's most of the work on the LP, and I'm very proud of what I did on it, honestly, because I'm going to be very arrogant here. I think it's very unlikely you'll ever see a Guild Wars Let's Play that, in terms of audio, and I don't mean substance of commentary and stuff, but in terms of audio, I doubt you'll ever see a Let's Play that's better than what I've produced here, because the amount of time investment it takes, and you have to be very, very good with the software you're choosing to edit with, I think, to really efficiently do what I did on this series. And it's the kind of thing, it's like that Futurama quote, if you did it right, no one will be sure you did anything at all. But, you know, if you watch someone doing it poorly, the audio is going to be so messy. I platformed, hopefully, almost every syllable that I could of the devs' voice acting and implementation. So, yeah, that was a big part of this that I was happy with. Thank God the side-by-side cutscenes are predictable at the very least, let me say that much. Alright, so, yeah, then there were the gameplay rules. Permadeath. Simple thing to actually add some stakes because there are no stakes otherwise. I can't do anything about, oh, protect the glory of Tyria, it's gonna sink. It will never sink. I can't do anything about stuff like that, but I can at least add some stuff there. Now, adding permadeath is what fueled a lot of the storyboarding later, because I realized I could... This is a fake rule. And what I'm doing at the end of the story, at the end of the series in that montage I did, where I show you the true deaths, is blatantly revealing that to people. It's a fake rule because it doesn't really matter if it's it's there as a to prop up some tension, but you know you can only ever go so far, and the tension isn't really meant to be real. I did sincerely play every instance trying not to die, and when we saw our first death in the Ascalon Catacombs, I was sincerely bummed out about it. But look, it should have been clear that this is a fake rule. The first death of the series in Ascalon Catacombs on Tyrix, and I just kept playing. I didn't honor it. I just gave him a peg leg and moved on and glossed over it. And no one really fought against me on that in a big way. It's kind of scary how much you can just dictate. As long as you don't let the conversation go to a certain place, you can just sort of dictate the thinking of people. And we just move on. But then we act like it's still this big holy sacred thing. It's not a holy sacred thing. Well, this is actually, it's to prop up a bit of tension, but it's to allow me to do the Casey death. That's the whole reason for this. I needed real stakes for Claw Island, because Claw Island is the height of tension building for the game. It's very good. I think a lot of people will agree the Claw Island episode, it's the first time we broached an hour, and for a very good reason, I think, is probably one of the best moments of the whole series. Claw Island is really, really good in terms of setting up the tension and the way they juggle the dialogue and everything coming together. It's a brilliant part of the story. I'm talking about the first Claw Island mission. Retribution, the return to it's pretty good as well. But, you know, I wanted to accentuate that. That entire death of Casey there, everything, it was all fake. The way I did that, I had him in an outfit, which he'd only just started wearing that episode. I was blatantly lying to you guys about why I was wearing that. It wasn't because I thought it looked cool. I mean, I do think it looks cool. But also, it's so that I could sneakily unequip all of his armor in the background. So I knew he was ultra squishy. And I knew I'd done a test playthrough of that. I knew how many Risen there were. I walked through too quickly at the end, knowing I would over-aggro. And I deliberately got myself killed there. Because that was always the plan, to have Casey killed off there. So I could have the Deborah reintroduction later. So that we would have 3 perfectly different characters of each order to go through most of victory or death at the end. You know, the 3 branches. It's clunky playing it with 4, okay? And so, yeah, and I was happy to go up to 4 and even 5 right at the end, where it all come down to a final point anyway, which is why the Norn was so late, which we'll talk about later. But, yeah, so permadeath, that was all kind of a fake thing. To talk about the death montage, there were a lot of deaths, right? Ulfric is the only character that actually beat it permadeath. And that owes to the fact that most of his gameplay I did in like a single day. You know, we did the series, which wasn't over a single day. That was over, you know, however many weeks. But then I went from the Grawl chapter all the way through the whole game to Romka's last voyage. In a single day, and I just played very carefully and made sure, and you know, I never tried to get my characters killed. Caraflower had 2 deaths. I don't remember where her first death was, but the second death was at Zaitan. Seriously, in fact, here I will show you. Here's the footage of Caraflower dying at Zaitan. Amazing. I mean, there's a whole thing here, right? The finale was very long and wordy, and I'd already said the really major things I wanted to say about the boss fight, so I didn't edit this in the actual episode, especially because she died, which would have overcomplicated things, because I'd be doing this whole discussion here. But to talk about the deadliness here, I'm not hiding the fact that the Zaitan fight is actually really engaging and deadly, and look, guys, it's actually amazing. I'm not hiding that fact. This is actually even worse to me for the Zaitan fight. This is not the first time this has happened. I think I did a stream a long time ago where this has happened as well. I know that Zaitan has one-shot potential, and you're seeing that there. And you can say, well, look, that raises stakes for the final boss battle. That's got to be in its favor. The thing is, you can fight Zaitan 5 or 6 times in a row. And I did that, okay? I beat him 5 times in a row for this series. 4 times in a row for this series. Well, 5 including the test play. And he never one-shot me except here, right? You can beat him and beat him and beat him. There's no predicting this ability, really. The reason I think Caraflower got one-shot is the way that it tracks these AoEs onto targets. So, did she have minions up in that footage? I'm not actually watching it right now, but I think it's like a really weird, peculiar... It's a thing that I don't think the devs were really anticipating or predicting or going for. And, you know, it's clunky. It might happen. It might not. There's no consistency there. That to me, is still not well-designed boss fight. It takes one step forward that he can kill you, definitely, but I think it takes several steps back in how irregular and oddly implemented that is. So yeah, she died. She was actually the last one to die. Caraflower the Necromancer died at the end. I kind of like that. Who else we got? Tyrix. Now, Tyrix is the one that you guys in the community noticed died, and I wasn't talking about it. Tyrix died, I think it was while I was AFKing between videos, possibly I never recorded vistas or ambient dialogue on the main characters because of this risk, but I'm pretty sure he died while I was AFK somewhere, and I hadn't really noticed it. Someone might have come along and rezzed me, because there's a couple of Tyrix episodes where his armor is broken. This is just what I remember. It's about a year ago now. I might be actually iffy on the details here, but he had a broken armor, and people noticed broken armor in the comments. And you know, some people were really quite uppity about it as well, I tell you. But yeah, eventually I repaired it and moved on. I actually think I had another armor repair issue at one point, which was I re-equipped something that had been broken before from elsewhere on my account. Like I think I had a broken back piece, which I equipped onto Bract to help him in maybe Sorrow's Embrace or something. And then he had broken gear there or something. It actually wasn't to do with a death, which was kind of interesting. Let's speak about Brack, though. Brack, 68 deaths. Let me just tell you something. Kudu is a deadly bastard. Seriously, a lot of those deaths were Kudu deaths. That whole thing is fake there. There's a couple of very sneaky edits. But there's a moment where I'm fighting Kudu and running down a corridor. And Kudu snipes me, and I get a good dodge. And it's a really good moment. At that moment, I could just leave the corridor, break combat, and re-engage. And I edit it to make it look like that's exactly what I do. But in truth, I turned around very quickly, ran back in, and Kudu sniped me again instantly, and I just died straight away. So that was Brack's first death. He did the actually really difficult room in the tanky gear and stuff. He did that. He cleared his whole way through perfectly fine. But then Kudu killed me a couple more times in that boss fight. And then Bract had other deaths as well. I don't remember if he died anywhere else in any other dungeons. But, the other thing about Kudu, by the way, is Bract got Kudu to like 1% health and then died. And I was in a really tricky position there. Because how do I edit it? I'm going to run in to fight Kudu on 100% health with all my cooldowns up and everything ready. And then I'm going to flick Kudu and he's going to die. So how do I edit that death out? How does it work? Blah, 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 blah. And by the way, the reason I edit these deaths out and faked it and lied, okay, is because the rule, yes, the rule is a placebo, but it still has value in what it's doing. It wasn't in my interest to further obfuscate the discussion of a dungeon episode or whatever with all this talk about why we're breaking the permadeath rules further, if I can just sweep that aside. Because that doesn't serve the story that I was trying to tell in those dungeons, if that makes sense. Or wherever a death may have actually occurred. It's not actually important. Like, if I had honored the permadeath, that doesn't serve the series better than if I sweep it aside and keep the three characters of the three distinct orders. What, do we want to stall the whole series out while I play through a whole other character that I'm forcing you to watch? Well, okay, we're not going to force me to watch, so I'm just going to skip through it. So then what's the purpose of the permadeath? Just to make me waste a ton of time playing the game again to get another Asura with a slightly different name that you have less connection to? Or, you know, or do we eliminate that character fully then, and now we don't get that branch, and the careful storyboarding I did doesn't work out? You know, there's not actually a positive enough end game there at the end, so just have your cake and eat it too, essentially. The 68 deaths, though, I'm pretty sure this was the big AFK. I was AFK somewhere, I died, I got rezzed, I died, I got rezzed, I died, I got rezzed from other players, and yeah, he climbed all the way up to there. Maybe there was something else going on there, but yeah, I'm not too sure. So there you go, that's permadeath. Limited over leveling. This, the only way to make the game actually an interesting game is to not over level too much, but of course you have to be matching the level of the story at least. So I tried not to do this, and yeah, that was fun. Not much to say there. No masteries I wouldn't otherwise have until we actually reach their expansion. Funnily enough, this is actually still not even really relevant yet. But yeah, I made sure to never glide, to never, you know, whatever other masteries might become available, or at least I tried. Now, I think that's perfectly right that I do that, so that when we get to the expansions and we start gliding, I can properly show it off and we can, you know, have it for fun. You know, I'm not mounting. In truth, as some of you know, I did fail this a couple of times. The big one, I was really impressed with the community on this. When I was at Garenhof, looking at the Wizard's Tower, I jump off of a cliff, and I'm supposed to fall, but I accidentally held the button slightly too long and glided in the middle. So I had to edit a gliding sequence of falling out of the Garenhof fall. But that means that there's always going to be a chunk of height that I've lost that you're going to see in like a jump shot. And people saw it. So I really tried to hide that very well, but people saw it. There were a couple of other times, honestly, where I edited out gliding also. And I'll tell you another thing. The jump pads I was using is actually kind of me breaking this, because that is gliding associated. But you don't get a glider out, so I feel like it's kind of okay there. No skins or gears or specs until the expansion where we unlock them. I've kept that true. You've only seen free-to-play core Guild Wars 2 stuff. Cultural stuff, stuff from the dungeons we're playing, basic gear. That's all you've seen. I'm very proud and happy with that. No skipping to areas out of my level or depth or out of order. Again, this is just like... This is the same as limited leveling, and this is the same as the mastery thing. It's just all about actually having a real series where you go through in order. It's not about role-playing. Oh, it's actually 2012. It's just honoring the experience players would have had when the game came out and the devs had in mind when the game came out. That's what it's about. I personally could not watch a series where someone in episode 2 skipped to ore for no reason, kind of thing. Like, I couldn't do that. I think that'd be really rubbish. I don't think that honors the game as it's supposed to be played. And that's what I'm trying to do with these presentations. I would really call them presentations rather than playthroughs at this point. If I didn't think that sounded so pretentious, I'd probably say it more. But I do that because what I'm really trying to do is tap into what the devs were trying to offer, not what all the ways you can break it necessarily. And unless it's very interesting, you know, and doesn't discredit the rest. So then we got stories. This is actually just a reference point for me. The Norn blog post was called A Spirit of Legends. The Legion of Char is the Char one. The Old College Try. The Line of Duty, Dream and Nightmare. So I did these whenever I needed to look back at those stories, know what they're saying. I would make sure I have the information of this recently read and held in my mind as I record the episodes, so that it would hopefully like feed into the commentary a little bit more. Like, you read this and you have a very clear upfront understanding of the 3 colleges and what they're all about. If that's something hazy to you, you can read that. I'm alright with that one, but when it comes to what were the legends that are extinct? Okay, I know it's Owl. What was the other? Wolverine? Ox? Or was it Bull? What, if you're hazy on those details, you kind of read these and you're okay. What are the names of the 3 tribunes? Bangar what now? And so, yeah. Then I guess this got edited in here in the middle of the series, probably. To do with the crates. Oh yeah, this was something I was actually playing with. Oh, I remember this. This never became a big thing. This was when I was on a loading screen in the Caledon Forest. I was thinking, hey, I can add interesting quotes from NPCs to those loading screens. And so you see that, but I didn't really like the effect I had in the end. I still don't. Every time I edit text on screen, I don't feel like I've got a good brand for that or a good method for that that's quick to implement and stuff. And yeah, that just felt weird in the text. So yeah, I didn't really do much of this in the end. But you'll see by the end when we were doing like the Grawl, I just read the quotes out as they were a part of the story. And I think that worked perfectly fine. And yeah, this is a wiki link to all the blog posts all together, which you guys can go to if you want. Then you got Halloween. Yeah, I was wondering when the festivals were coming up, that was a bit of a thing. Like, how do I cover these? Guild Wars 1, I had the exact same problem. When I first got to Joknar's Forge, it was during the Halloween event, I think. Or was it Christmas? No. I think it was Halloween when I started the series, and then it was Christmas by the time I got to Joknar's Forge. And the question is, oh, how do I cover these? Right now, I have no plans to, honestly. There is like a festival Let's Play you could do, right? Where New Year starts, and you cover the Chinese New Year, right? And you Let's Play that, and then you Let's Play the Super Adventure Box a bit later, and then you Let's Play the thing later, and you go along. I have no real plans for that. I have a Super Adventure Box series, but that's about as far as I'll go. And I recommend you guys watch that if you haven't. And you're watching this video sometime off in the future. It will all be up there. Okay, so then you've got the storyboard. All right, here's the big bit. Here's how I plotted everything out. I had to come up with every biography decision, everything, before the series came out, which was this huge encyclopedic thing. And by the time I'd finished this project, I was so thrilled and so happy with what I'd come up with. So let's see. And you won't see any character names. I only decided those right as I was shooting the episodes, really. So for the purposes of all of this, we just had a human. And I knew I wanted to do the level 1 to 20 story on the human. that they were going to be a noble with a lost sister of the Priory. You guys know why I've chosen a lot of this now. My reasoning was we start with a human because most people would rather play and watch a human. It's relatable. I think that's perfectly fair. If you go back to episode 1, you'll see a lot of comments. Not new comments that are being dropped now because people know that it's like in the past or whatever. But if you go back to that episode and watch some of the earlier comments, most of it is people saying, oh, I wish you'd played this. I wish you'd played that. I wish you'd played this. And obviously those are going to be there. But I still think, obviously, everyone who was happy I played human was going to be silent about that. And I think a lot of people would have just been expecting human and been satisfied on that expectation, and that all happened and they didn't even realize it, so why would they leave a comment? I think there's a bit of that going on as well. But yeah, I think that this is like the default, and this is the thing that most people would sort of follow along with. I think you have a higher chance. If I'd picked Asura at the start, I think people would have been like, I don't like watching Asura, I'm gonna leave, kind of thing, right? Because at this point, I'm leaving as a secret that it's going to be a multi-race playthrough. I could have right at the start said this is going to be a multi-race playthrough, but I wanted it to be a surprise and an interesting moment to reveal it's a multi-race playthrough. Also, there's just the simple fact that I think at the very start, it's about boiling the frog. If I'd said this is going to be a multi-race playthrough, people might have thought, oh, I'm not invested in that. And indeed, that's kind of something that happened when we swapped to Char here. I think I lost a portion of the viewer base were really into Casey, and they started forming connections to Casey and the human, and then that all got very diluted as soon as we swapped to Char. And I think that that's a reason people get burnt out, and I understand that. I knew that was a risk when I started all of this, but at the end of the day, I couldn't imagine a decent Guild Wars 2 Let's Play that was just one story, and the point it was to flirt with all of them. That was what was so fun about this to me, the storyboard. So yeah, you know, I take my licks where I have to. We went with Noble because it offers the best view of high-level Divinity's Reach stuff, so we get to interact with the Queen and Anise and whatever, in theory, more. It shows the party trick man, who will appear at the end of the game. I'm not gonna lie, this is the main motivation. Wozmac, I knew... the devs were bookending their game with Wozmac. I knew I had to bookmark my LP with Wozmac. So... That was really the big thing here. Starting, I mean, a human would have been a separate decision, but obviously I had to be Noble. Never knowing our parents means we meet a confessor and learn as much as possible about the Shining Blade, which I really wanted, but we get more of that later. So what I'm writing here is there's no point starting the series with stuff to do with the confessor when it's not until like Season 2 and post Heart of Thorns and Season 3 that's really relevant. So instead, we're going to go Lost Sister, and we'll do the Confessor stuff later. Lost Sister unlocks cooler observations later, and obviously the Deborah stuff. We stop at the start of Chapter 3 before deciding to choose an order. The arc where you, as a human, actually pick an order won't appear on the main series, and instead will be a bonus arc like the Infinity Ball. Now, there's some stuff to talk about here. This allows us to skip what, in my mind, is an incredibly weak and boring part of the personal story that depicts a sudden attack on Divinity's Reach, and whose only redemption is the Underworld Creatures section and the Grenth Priestess. So, my original plan was not to show that, and you guys will remember, in the series, I actually said all of this. I wasn't going to show this arc. However, the way it worked out in the end, once I was actually in the thick of making the series, you know, we have to adapt and change things. When I was in the thick of making the series, I kind of realized that loss of cohesion felt really awkward. It felt really awkward to be away from Casey so long. And then the first time we returned to a character in that way, because remember, we go human, Char, Asura, and then back to human, right? The first time we returned to a character, if that also was that character skipping forward through story, it just felt really dangerous to me. Like, the first return to a character we like should be very as cohesive as possible. And so in the end, I decided to make that a part of the main series. I still think it's a really crap section, and quite often the orders sections are really phoned in by the devs. But we got the Grenth Priestess thing. So original plan was to cut that. And if you listen to the commentary, you'll hear I actually say this was going to be a bonus series. Oh, the other thing, the Infinity Ball. Now, if we scroll all the way down, you'll see I have 17 bonus episodes written out here. I actually was scheduling in a couple of bonus series beyond the Deborah one to do with what I view as really important lore that I haven't done in the end, and I'm still not 100% sure on them. The Infinity Ball is one of them. We'll get to it with the Asura. Alright, then we go to the char, and the char is going to go from 1 to 30, plus do the Ascalon Catacombs. And how we implemented the dungeons here is really important too to me. So, the character doing the dungeon basically should feel that that dungeon is important to them. You know, there's a real connection there. Casey obviously doesn't get to do Cordicus's Manor, but our Asura does and has that connection to Zodra at least. That was the flimsiest, but you know, the char following Ritlock into Ascalon Catacombs, it works. And there are other ways you can configure this. One thing I really regret, that I've been dreaming about doing this video for ages, honestly, because when I wrote this storyboard, there's a lot of really nuanced, tiny little things in here. There's like, if you just change one thing, if you try and swap that to something else, it has a cascading impact on the entire rest of the storyboard. Like, it all comes down like a house of Jenga, especially at the end when it gets to the Orient stuff. It's like, this character has to do this at this point and read this mail talking about this dungeon at this point, otherwise it all breaks. And I can't really remember what a lot of those pitfalls were now, because we've just got to sit back and enjoy it. But, you know, I challenge you guys, write your own storyboard. And I spent, like, a long time writing this storyboard, by the way. This is, like, multiple days and days of effort writing this out and finding the perfect way through it all, in my opinion. So anyway, Blood Legion, this is, like, my real stamp, I would say. The ordering of everything, that's me that's done that. You know, rather than everything else is what the devs wrote, and it's the dev story and stuff. But this is the best viewing of it I could do. So we're going to go Blood Legion, Honorless Gladium Vigil. Swapping to Char next is a nice change of locations, I say. We pick Blood Legion to maximize Ritlock's screen time. He'll become a major character as time goes by. Blood also has the cool thing of killing that guy. Yeah, our superior. So, yeah, and I think that demonstrates the ferociousness of the Char very well. This thing about maximizing Ritlock's screen time, that's not actually necessarily true. You get a little bit more Ritlock, I think, with him sort of directly with us directly under him. But a lot of the others get a lot of Ritlock screen time too. And a lot of you guys were curious about this. I think you were right to. It might have been better to go Iron Legion on this. But there you go. We pick Honorless Gladium because the soldier is just a straight up treasure hunt and boring. I guess that was one of the options I didn't like. The Flame Legion story depicts an attack on the Black Citadel that is a terrible whiff, and we don't need much more lore about them anyway. And the Gladium has a nice line about Ritlock not liking deserters, calling to the Logan plot. So again, cohesion. It's all about doing everything I can to make Destiny's Edge feel like they're thinking about one another a lot. And yeah, Ritlock has a beautiful line there. When it comes to not liking deserters and referencing his old friend, that you just kind of don't get with the other stories. One of the things I really loathe about the personal story is manufacturing random attacks on the cities. And this was where the Char do that. And it's really lame. One of the worst personal story instances in the game, and I'm definitely not going to show it if I don't have to. It's like you fight a single effigy that's attacking the Black Citadel, and then it's over. It's really bad. In fact, I once dedicated a whole video to personal story criticism, very shallow personal story criticism, considering the amount I've written and thought about it since then. But just about how upsetting this is, and the effigy just insta-dies. Anyway, it's hard to find allies that will champion how bad a lot of the gameplay is and a lot of this stuff these days, because it's old and people have moved on. But it's so important, especially... Well, anyway, I'm getting off topic. We joined the Vigil because it's nice to stay close to Almora, both Char. To see more Ascalon stuff on a Char, it feels most like the nature of the Char. I still agree with that completely. You get to... Terix's adventure stayed in Ascalon for the large part the whole way. Every opportunity of a story step to be in Ascalon, Terix was basically there for it. And I love that. A benefit of being Char that does Chapter 3 first is that the story feels a little bit more coherent as your warband actually travels with you. It won't be transparent just how shit this all is until much later, when hopefully other aspects of the game have hooked up the audience. I apologize for the swearing. I did write this for myself. So, yeah, I still stand by this completely. Like I say, the Chapter 3 arcs where you're joining an order are generally really bad. They just sweep in a ton of new characters and manufacture something that's supposedly a problem, and then manufacture, like, really fake-sounding choices over and over and over again. And I understand why it's bad, because they did it so many times for 5 races, you know. There's so many choices baked into those. You know, there's just nothing good about them. But Char is probably the best of all, because instead of sweeping out all the old characters, they keep them. It's like if we played Norn and Bagarth was still with us, and like Jotun influence was still with us. It's really good playing a Char. You get so much super bespoke dialogue based on choices, like your biography. You choose your best friend who survives with you. They get dialogue in chapter 3, and you're speaking to them in like Gendaran Fields, in the mountains at Gendaran Fields. You still are speaking to NPCs in a biography choice from back then that most other races, that biography choice means nothing. Like, who was your first inventor or your mentor or whatever as an Asura? You know, was it the Rockets guy or the Gadgets guy or whatever? That means nothing for the Asura, but for the Char, oh baby, for the Char, you get to see that. Fion the Wraith will actually still be speaking to you. So, yeah, this is like doing the best job I can for ArenaNet to convince the audience that, hey, the game's really good. Because, look, you know, of course it's still honouring old decisions. What game wouldn't honour old decisions? Well, only later you realise just what a shambles it is, right? So we start off on a really strong foot here. We'll witness all of these characters at Lion's Arch, recognising only Ritlock and Logan. We get a mail about Air going to the Ascon Catacombs, unfamiliar with her character, but visiting the dungeon to help out and bonding with Ritlock nonetheless. At the end of the dungeon, just as Tyria feels large and exciting because a new order to join, an unfolding story with the mascots, we cut to a new tune. So, let me just say here, this LA scene was really tricky to do because I knew it was going to come up 5 times. And I know that people don't want to watch the same story over and over and over. And this came up a lot, you know, like the Tome of the Rubicon mission and stuff. A lot of the Claw Island things. So I knew I'd have to montage through a lot of stuff. I really tried my best to cut out the fat, but still leave the scenes in. So when we get back here in Lion's Arch, we see the scene again, but I cut out all the dialogue between the Destiny's Edge members that aren't our currently favoured. So the next time we come back here on the Asura, I leave just the Zodja stuff in, really, and the rest is cut really short. And when we do the Claw Island montage, I cut it really short, and then on the second Claw Island montage, it's like extremely short. It's almost finished. I gotta say, one of the most depressing comments, or selections of comments I had as the series was going along, was people telling me, oh yeah, I was enjoying it, but you were repeating, it was repeating stuff too much, because you're doing the same, you're doing so many races and the stories keep coming up. It was too much backtracking. It was too much going over the same story over and over and over again. And that really, even as I say that right now, it bums me out to realize people thought that and felt that. And, you know, I can't deny them or tell them not to feel that way, because I was really acutely aware that that was a risk. And I tried really hard to edit stuff out so that you wouldn't feel that way. And what you would see on screen was the really exciting stuff. Like, when I was making those montages, it was always a real difficulty for me because I love so much of, like, with the Claw Island stuff, like seeing Zot with a little joke like, oh, I don't, just plug it in, and, you know, seeing the shots of Blightcast flying around as I'm fighting, defending the lighthouse, and it's like, oh, I want to leave this in, and the ambience, and that Char talking about tingles up his spine before the Claw Island attack. That's really cool to listen to now that we know that the attack's coming and we're in montage form. You know, I want to leave so much stuff in, but I cut out as much as I could. I was hoping that as people watch those montages, even though I was leaving stuff in, they were feeling excited about the stuff I was leaving in, because as I was editing, I was excited about leaving them in, but maybe I was a bit heavy with it in the end. Anyway, this was tricky, and this was the first place that this became a thing. And then, yeah, the other thing here, just as Terrier feels large and exciting because there's a new order to join, unfolding story with the mascots, we cut to a new tune. To me, this here is the best part of the personal story. The moment where I was most excited as an original player and on some subsequent playthroughs as well. That moment where you get to Lion's Arch and you feel like you've joined the real world, the melting pot of the races, the Asura gates laid bare to you to take you anywhere you want in the world. Suddenly, you're a high enough level to explore a vast amount of terrain. Crafting has suddenly probably become really interesting to you. World versus world is now becoming apparent to you. PvP is becoming apparent. The story, very importantly, the story has found a way to branch into 2 pieces at once. And we still know a lot about our mentor. We've still been spending a lot of time with Zodja and still been spending a lot of time with Ritlock. At that moment, Guild Wars 2 feels incredible. And I wanted to present that in my series by adding another thing to the list. We cut to a new tune, and it's like, oh my god, and there's another character. Oh my god, we're doing so right. That was what I was trying to tap into there. And the reason Guild Wars 2 feels at its best there and then kind of withers away afterwards is because they don't require you to do the dungeons. And they don't require you to read the mails. And suddenly Zodja goes from being a voice-acted present character in your missions to just an occasional mail. that you sometimes see. And that's a criticism of 2012, let alone now, when instead, by the time you get to this moment, you've got mails of Zodja in Sorrow's Embrace and stuff, and it's completely broken, and it's a disgrace the way that it's implemented now. But, you know, I can hide that for the series, at least. You know, I don't read those mails. I make sure everything is not out of order. But Jesus. All right, so then we go Asura. Not Sylvari, Asura. And now we're doing level 1 to 40 plus a dungeon. So the Bract is now the longest, right? We're gonna be a statics, trans-atmospheric converter, and the Order of Whispers. We take engineer to make soloing CM easier, I guess I decided. I think my reasoning here was reflect, by the way, which eventually got nerfed mid-series. Also, the alchemy lines up with learning about the Hylic. Also, by the way, I know it's written quite briefly here, but I also knew I wanted a medium armor here because it was light and then heavy, and then I knew I wanted medium. There's more to the decision going on here. Some of these notes are not writing the obvious because they're notes for me, and I know the obvious. It's the specific other little things that I ruminated on and excited me that I've put on, right? We're taking statics to establish the very old energy detector for the end of the game. 2 references at the end of the game. One in the Cathedral of Silence, the other one in the actual final dungeon. Also to get some deeper lore and callbacks to Guild Wars 1. We choose to infiltrate the lab during the statics choice. Because don't forget, it's not just the big choices, it's the mini choices as well. This is because it establishes more sneaky infiltration stuff for Order of Whispers cohesion. There's more dialogue. Oh, okay. And on this has just reminded me. I want to be clear about something else as well. This is not all of the prep work that went into the series. Every one of these, you know, there's like... This is a branch, okay, that I wrote before it all started. Taking the very old energy detector. But this actually is 2 videos. Now, those 2 videos have, like, their own notepads. Not of this length, but, you know, probably about as long as, you know, down to probably the bottom of human, maybe middle of char. There's 2 videos that had notepads with their own huge details laying out what NPCs there were, what trivia there was, what dialogue was coming up, what little anecdotes and stories I wanted. Whenever I'm playing this game and doing this series, on a second monitor, I have another notepad up with all that information. So at every little line, every new line, you're looking at another like 2 notepads or so filled with information for me to jive off of as I present the episode. So every single episode, and that's all the same notepad file that I delete the contents of and then overwrite with the next episode once I'm done, and then I delete and overwrite with the next episode, and then I delete and overwrite. So yeah, this is not everything. I didn't then just wing it and then, you know, have all the commentary that I had. I then go off for the individual episodes and do specific research about those things. And so quite often here, I'm choosing a choice within a choice on the storyboard. But quite often the choice within a choice was decided a bit later once I was actually doing those secondary notepads. And, you know, because they tend to not have long-lasting consequences, right? But sometimes they've appeared here. So yeah, we infiltrate the lab. It establishes more sneaky infiltration stuff for Order of Whispers cohesion, because I knew he was going to be a spy character. There's also more dialogue. Nearly always I picked the instance that had more dialogue. Nearly always. Sometimes there was a really crucial bit of dialogue that was more important elsewhere, but that's what I mostly did. We take the trans-atmospheric converter story to establish Kudu as early as possible. Yeah, Kudu you can miss out on, guys. If you're not doing trans-atmospheric converter, and I relied on this Kudu story a lot. I actually ended up editing in segments of this, like 50 episodes later, when we were doing COE, just to remind people, hey, this was Kudu, this was how he sounded. Remember this dude? Yeah, I know it's easy to forget. It's possible to not even see him. So I was really proud of this. This is a perfect example of why the storyboard exists. If you don't do trans-atmospheric converter, you don't get much more on Kudu, and that makes the story so crap. Kudu is like one of the great antagonists of this game. Right? If you look at antagonists outside of the Elder Dragons, who have you got? You've got Kudu, right? You've got Kudu, maybe like you've got Ajax and some other, but Kudu has a lot of relevance, and so super important. Okay, and this means we miss the Infinity Ball storyline. And I choose not to do that, obviously, because Kudu is kind of non-negotiable to me. But also, the Infinity Ball storyline, as important as it is, in as much as we talk about it and think about it as lore nerds, It is a story played for gags. It is a joke. It is not it is not to be as taken as seriously as I think the community eventually has taken it, which is why the devs have never really done anything with it. So I think it's important to know about, and it's a pillar of discussion. But is it important for the personal story? Is it important for knowing about the Zaitan battle to come and the story of Destiny's Edge and their dungeons? No. Certainly not more important than Kudu, so the Infinity Ball is lost. Maybe it could be a bonus series at some point, is what I wrote here. And in fact, I didn't end up penning that in this storyboard when we get a bit lower. In the Transatmospheric Converter storyline, only to go back on it. Renege, is that the right word? In the Transatmospheric Converter storyline, we had the invariant base to hit Kudu head on because of a line of dialogue where he calls us the sidekick, which I guess I liked. In Chapter 3, we put Priory first. It's a shorter mission than the other one. We get some great dialogue about the Priory being attacked. Second, we pick Vigil as we get straight up a lot more dialogue that's relevant to the Elder Dragon threat. Look at this exclamation mark. There's a real disconnect between the domestic stuff and the dragon stuff later. So it was really on my mind for a lot of this to just, please, whenever you talk about the dragons, give me dragon stuff early on. A shame because we want whispers, really, with the infiltration. And then third, we pick Priory because it leads us to Brisbane, while the other mission overlaps with the same swamp location. So you see, these are like broad scope decision-making that we've got here. There's no notes here about Gore and what I have to say about him and meeting him and that. That was all elsewhere. I'll also note here... here we go. We choose Whispers because of the similarity to the Arcane Eye sneakiness, because we did a lot with the Arcane Eye. Asura follows Gore on his further adventures. Getting Gore cohesion is really important. So there's actually one of the most complicated episodes in the entire series is here. It's the episode where we finish Chapter 3 for Bract, right before he goes to Lion's Arch. The decisions we made led us to an instance where the final dialogue is not implemented by ArenaNet. The dialogue that talks about Zodja going to Lion's Arch and all of that, it's not in the game. It's missing from that mission. If you pick Whispers, you don't get it. And you know what's really ironic? My first character in the actual game, as just a regular player, was an Asura, an Elementalist Asura that joins the Order of Whispers. So you miss this crucial thing about why we even go to Lion's Arch. It's really bad. But at this point in the series, there's a very much a thing. I make as many excuses for Guild Wars 2 and ArenaNet as I possibly can. I want to show the spirit of the game and what the devs were clearly going for. And so, yes, the Order of Whisper one might be missing the dialogue. But look, the dialogue is there for the Vigil one and the Dermot Priory one. So what I did here was I played through the story again on another Asura that I made to look exactly like Bract. And instead of choosing Whispers, I chose the other thing. And when I got the side-by-side cutscene, I snipped it out of that totally different mission and snuck it in to the Order of Whispers mission. Go back and watch that episode. There's a lot going on there. And if you look on the side-by-side cutscene, you'll see the character name is not Bract. It's a different character name. I think it's Issa that's there. And I used like 2 total makeover kits to do that, just so that you could have the cutscene that clearly the devs wanted to be there, but isn't actually there, but was on another mission. Not only that, but that episode in general had a ton of random edits and broken things in it, which I had to do a lot of work to pace around. Like, the Gore speech had a lot of substance, and it fires really quickly, and they proceed talking at that lecture at almost random, unpredictable times. So there were like 2 or 3 occasions where Gore says something and then falls silent, and he prompts me into a huge discussion about something really important, only to then just start talking again in the middle of my conversation. And it was that audio thing I'm talking about, but to 100,000 degrees. So the mission is actually extended in editing, like way longer than it actually was, just to give me breathing room to get all of this conversation out. So yeah, there was a ton of stuff, and that was actually one of the longest, most complicated things for me to shoot. And I actually, coming back up to the top here, I missed the very first line, which is really important. I wanted to talk about this right at the start. I've just reminded myself. Here at the top, you can see it says production, keyframing, no heavy editing, so it's basically like streaming. Now, let me be clear about this. Again, last year I did a video why we're doing the Let's Play and how I came to be excited about it. But I knew it was going to be a really long project. Not a whole year, but I knew it was going to be a long project and a lot of work. So the whole idea, the only way I was ever going to sign up for this, in truth, and I have this at the head of the notepad, this was the most important thing, was if it was easy for me to make. The whole point, it was supposed to be time efficient, and the point was I could get up, do an episode, and then wholly dedicate myself to other projects, like the audiobook project, regular videos for Guild Wars, stream-related stuff, other games, okay? Like, the whole point was 2018 was supposed to be like a totally fresh, invigorated thing on other stuff. And I was going to have the Let's Play to kind of sustain easy content that I cared about and put a lot of work into, obviously. Easy by my standards, but easy to shoot content that people would love watching because it's a Let's Play of my main game. So people are obviously going to watch it, right? But two things happened. One, the viewership on the Let's Play was nowhere near high enough to sustain just doing the Let's Play. Which was a real blow to this entire idea. But second, this idea of doing it really easily fell apart. Totally fell apart. The Vista dialogue, what I just mentioned, everything with that Asuran mission, the stories, I couldn't help it. And I sort of feature creeped the series too much, and I started caring too much about the series. As viewership was going down and down, I was putting more and more and more effort into it. And I actually think the Let's Play's done a lot of damage to the channel in terms of what I could have been doing this year versus what I have been doing, because people don't care how hard you're working on it. It's 2012 stuff. It's not relevant to them. You guys listen to this right now are not, you know, the normal viewer, right? So anyway, 2018 was extremely disappointing professionally for a few reasons, but it was my own inability to not follow this. So what does this actually mean? Keyframing means what I'm doing right now. If I flub or make a mistake while I'm speaking, I have a hotkey I can press, which means, okay, come back and edit this. The rest of the commentary is fine, but you have to edit this. So that's what I mean. That's not actually what keyframing means, by the way. The keyframing is to do with animation and so on, which is a totally different thing with pans and crops and twists and things. But this is just a little word that I use to describe the method I use here, where I just add a specific frame with a key for me to return to, right? Like a marker. So, yeah, that's what this means. And that is the technique I was using throughout the LP, but then no heavy editing. This didn't come true in the end. I was editing extremely heavily some episodes. They were taking ages. The finale alone took... I mean, the finale's special, and I'm happy to spend a lot of time on it. But it took, like, 2.5 days straight. And I'm talking, like, 10 hours sat at the PC doing nothing but the finale. Like, it takes ages just to play a raw story mode 4 times in a row. Just to do that is a pain in the ass, let alone making sure every bit of commentary I really want there, and all the precise notation, and all the research for every episode. And it was... The point of it all at the start was to storyboard it, have some basic ideas, and just, like, whack the episodes out, and not go too crazy with it. That was the idea. So it's basically like streaming. This series is nothing like streaming. And at the end, all right, I'm sitting here now, I've invested my time that way. And I'm really proud and really happy with what I've done. But it is not actually in line whatsoever with what I originally planned. What I originally planned was the production was supposed to be easy, but built on exciting principles. That's what the idea was. And then we come to, like, the Asura thing here, where I'm so invested in giving you guys a great experience and honoring what the devs wanted, that I do, like, this crazy stuff on an episode like that Asuran one. And again, it's like, you watch that episode, a lot of it should be seamless, hopefully. And a lot of the editing time was actually, again, on audio, and I couldn't have anticipated how horrible this game is audio-wise to LP, and how much you have to wait. Like, at one point, one of the Lion's Arch missions, I actually went to data mining the client to pull all the individual audio strings out, which are just incomprehensible strings of numbers and letters, to find some lich audio that is broken in-game. And again, I sit there, I'm smiling as I say that. I'm like, hell yeah, I put that effort in. Who goes to that level for the game that they're playing? I was really happy with that, but you know, that's not in line with the original remit. But yeah, that was the lich when you're seeing the Priory version of the Attack on Lion's Arch. There's a lich who doesn't have a lich voice effect, and all of his dialogue just cuts out, which is a shame because he's supposedly the writer of what was he the writer of? Some important thing in Guild Wars 1. The History of Lion's Arch or something. Anyway. So, we choose Whispers because of the similarities. We already read that. Okay, this time, right after the Lion's Arch meeting, where we now recognize Zodja, we proceed to join an order instead of doing Ascalon Catacombs. Basically, yeah, last time we go AC and then character swap. This time, we instead just continue the story. And I like this because what I've done so far is establish expectations, right? Expectation is that we're just going to play a human. Oh no, we're playing a char. Ooh. Expectation is we'll go back to the human. Oh no, we're not going back to the... Oh no, we do go back to the human at that point, right? No. Oh no, we don't go back to the human. We go to the Asura. Ah! And then there's an expectation. Okay, is he going to swap after the Lion's Arch meeting now? Oh! And now, so just keep creating expectations and then breaking them. That's what I was doing all the time in the series. I'm not going to possibly be able to explain every single one to you all, but yeah, and I like that kind of stuff, so I don't know. It maybe annoyed people, but I thought it was cool. So yeah, we join an order, and again, people want to see headway be made as well. That's the thing. People don't want to keep stalling at that point and then just go back, and then stall and go back. If I had swapped right here at this Lion's Arch meeting to a Sylvari, everyone would have been convinced that the trajectory for the next several weeks or months of this series was going to be playing through a Sylvari, and then stopping, and then playing through a Norn, and then stopping, and then finally we can actually move on, right? That's what people would have been convinced was going on. I wanted you always to be unseated, not quite sure what is WP doing next, right? And that leads to the excitement of clicking the next video. So yeah, we go on, we do the order arc. We choose Thrown Off Guard for the first order. We lay the decoy trail. It's really funny. Yeah, it's just very good. But this is where we say goodbye to Ben Tenstrike, something that still I'm not sure whether was a good idea. Maybe going with Ben was a better choice here. Just as we're informed about the lesser races, we get, and again, the connections say between the minister in Divinity's Reach and the minister we meet, and his wife that we meet in the Order of Whispers and stuff, not on this notepad. Just as we were informed about the lesser races, and at this point, people are like super invested in Bract. Bract has had a huge playthrough here. We go to Cordicus. We play Cordicus. Everything's perfect, and then we cut to the human. So, I want to mention something here about the cutting. I always knew I wanted to cut, and it to be a surprise, and I didn't want to actually mention it in the dialogue. In the commentary, sorry. So, how do I do that best? Well, I liked the idea of having kind of a meta story where it was like the video was glitching or bugging, or there were alternate timelines going on. And that's why when we start a new character, I act like the series is beginning again, because I think that was a fun sort of nod to the people who wanted the alternate timeline. They wanted the different character. They wanted me to pick a different race. They didn't want to pick a human. So then when I say, oh, Guild Wars sees a game with 5 races, here's the char, it's kind of like, look, we get to start again. And it was a really interesting thing to play with that was very difficult. So I ended up landing on a pretty nice transition effect. It was an effect I'd actually been using for a Merciless series on streams. You know, that sort of bugs and shifts the screen across. And kind of showed that there was this bug going on. And two kind of interesting things to say about this. First of all, the commentary became really, really, really tricky. In that, at the start, it was easy to play a char and just never mention Casey or what we'd seen with the humans or whatever. But later, when the stories come together, like the beauty of the game is to say, if I'm playing Tyrix and we see an NPC that only Bract had interacted with, I really now kind of wanted to be able to say, hey guys, remember Bract met this character? Oh, but you can't say Bract because the version of me Let's Playing here isn't this supposed to kind of be in another timeline? And the point was never to be explicit about this or set hard and fast rules. It was just like a fun little thing to flirt with and play with over the series. But I always felt really odd. And a lot of the time I would actually flub and have to do do-overs and takeovers to just try and slightly make my commentary a little bit more ambiguous as to what timeline I was supposedly on, kind of thing. And I never really knew where it was going. I knew I liked it. I knew I liked playing with a format and experimenting with what a Let's Play can be. But where, you know, and kind of being a bit, dare I be snobby enough to say, a bit artistic about it, right? Like, I liked that. But I didn't really know where I was going with it. And so the transitions in the early stage, I felt like I'd found a rhythm by about now, because it was still early enough that the various disparate threads weren't coming together and I wasn't getting thrown off a loop too often. So I went a bit further with the edit here, and I actually spliced in like a 1 frame or a couple of frames of the Thormanova reactor. And the reason I did that, and I was actually using Thorman overreactor sound effects, and I was using like radiation sound effect at one point, and like I blurred the screen with static. There's a natural transition effect in there that I never used since. I did that because I liked the idea that somehow I could tie this to the Thorman overreactor disaster, maybe some season 1 stuff, and like the answer was that yeah, there's the story of Guild Wars 2, but there's also the story of 1 year before Guild Wars 2. Everything got fractured into fractals of reality, and it affected my Let's Play, and we're like, you know, it's kind of been broken into these different timelines because of the time-space disruption. I thought the Thorman overreactor represented that really well. So I kind of edited that in with the vague idea that maybe later I would come to a consensus on how to deliver that story to you guys properly. But every time since I've thought about it, and I just can't think of a way to do it that's not cheesy. What's been fun about the alternate timeline and the video editing, glitching and stuff, is it's kind of a fun thing that isn't really nailed down. It's not set in stone. And I think that's where the beauty comes from with it, the ambiguity. But I did edit the Thorman overreactor in, and people noticed it. And then we're looking for something of more substance. What I did was I set the precedent there that this was going to develop, because it had just developed with the Thorman overreactor pin. So how would it develop further? And there have been lots of times throughout the series where I was very close to putting more Thorman overreactor images in and going, but until I'd had a really concrete plan on what I really wanted to do with it, I wasn't ready to commit. And then by the end, the series got so involved in other areas of production as all the later stages came out, and the videos ended up consistently getting around that hour length, and I was so passionate about the other stuff, I sort of thought, maybe I don't do it too much. The only reason I would look back at the Thorman overreactor thing and the video, you know, developing obviously the house style became the glitching, and I kept the glitching, and we played with that the whole way through. But to develop on it, the idea of developing on it, the only reason I would go back is to honor that original development of the Thorman overreactor being put in. And I figured in the end, if that was the only reason I was doing it just because I was a little bit there, maybe I shouldn't. I do feel bad though. This is kind of like my series is GS Ball, right? Like you watch the Pokemon series through. There was a big Twitch stream of it last year. It's painful to watch that because they set up this whole cool thing about the GS Ball, and Ash carries it around for ages, and then he leaves it somewhere, and they were going to make a movie about it, and then they don't make the movie, so then the entire plot thread is just abandoned, and it feels horrible, and it's just left there. I feel like this is my GS Ball, right? Like, it's this thing that I was kind of maybe going to do something with, but didn't in the end. No one is really asking about it anymore, and I think because I've done the track, there's so much cutting between characters, people kind of get the story. They kind of get what I'm talking about. They kind of get the alternate timeline, and it's just a bit of fun without me really having to go into details. I don't want to, you know, dissect the frog and ruin it for everyone in the series, so I never did in the end. And I was playing with it right up till the end. Probably the last one is... so the commentary was really tricky. And by the end, I basically had to just be me. I couldn't be a specific timeline version of me. I had to be me that talked about all the characters. Like, look at the finale. The whole way through that, I'm constantly talking about all the different characters and where we've been and where we've come from. And I kind of had to transition to that. So when we start the Norn, the last big edit and, you know, glitch, you'll actually notice right after the Norn character creation, or even I think during Norn character creation, after I say Guild Wars 2 is a game of 5 races, it glitches again really quickly, which doesn't happen with Brack's story or Caraflow's story, or it doesn't happen anywhere, but with the Norn it does. It does that quick little glitch, and that's there. I don't know whether people really picked up on this, what I was implicitly saying there, but that's there to say the timeline has moved again. And it's me back. It's the me you were just listening to that was at Fort Trinity and stuff. And guess what, guys? As we play the Norn here, I'm not going to pretend I'm a noob again. I'm not going to pretend I've just started playing the game. And I'm not going to roleplay that idea of, oh, I'm a Norn, and oh, what are the humans? And all. No. We're going to do this from an informed place now. And I felt that was really important to do, to have the commentary geared like that now, because it was our 5th time through at the end of the series. And there's a lot of stuff with pacing that's going on there. Like, I knew the Norn episodes weren't going to be that long. We'll get to those in a second. So yeah, having it in an informed place, I just think sort of needed to happen. So a lot of this just kind of happens in the background, and people don't think actively about it. But there's those little signs in there as we go through. I just mess with people a lot with the glitches. Sometimes there's an expectation we're gonna character swap because we're at the end of a chapter or something, and I'll glitch, but then like okay, so what I'll do is I'll telegraph that we are gonna character swap by throwing a glitch maybe 5 minutes earlier, right? And the Rumke mission, well, I'll get to that later. Anyway, so there you go. Back to the human. At this point, we swap back to the human. I did play the level 30 story in the end. Off screen, he was going to join the Dermot Priory, though. This just felt weird, right, to have him off screen join the Priory. It wasn't right. It was our first time seeing the Priory as well. It will feel nice to swap into the human, given all the human-centric story in the Whispers and the Order of Dungeon. That's true. Order of Whispers is all about Demi and Cordicus and the Cordicus Manor Dungeon. It all feels very coherent. I still like that. We skip unnecessarily rewatching the LA meeting scene. I guess I have that written there, but I think there were elements edited in still. As a human, we play the Dermot Priory stuff. We meet Siren. We do this because we'd rather show the Vigil and the Char, so Vigil wasn't an option. And Whispers on Asura has already been shown off with Tybalt. Then we do the Quaggan in the Lesser Races arc. So here, the House of the Jenga, the Tower of Jenga. This being Quaggan is very precisely retroactively chosen because of how all the other ones are oriented. Because there's a really good pairing everywhere else. Human paired with Quaggan in the Shiver Peaks Mountain is actually not coherent at all. It's very weak. But it's here because all the other ones line up much better and Quaggan was left over, frankly. I think there was one swap I maybe could have made that occurred to me at the end. And that was that I could have had Norn do Quaggan. There was another shuffling. I can't remember what it was. There was another shuffling, though, that would have actually worked reasonably well. Yeah, I like Norn and Gruul because that keeps them in Dredgehorn Cliffs and does all that fun stuff. But the idea here, at least, is Casey's just been in the mountains because of the Dermot Priory, and he continues to be in the neighboring mountains with the Quaggan, and that feels coherent, at least to some degree. I mean, as humans, our brains are wired to find patterns, so quite often just the existence of being man helps us with stuff like this, but yeah. Then finish up with the Claw Island instance. Killing Siren, introducing Chahern. At this moment, our character itself will die too, and the human will never again be seen in the series. So you've seen the finale, obviously, and how I've ended it all. That was also all planned. When I say series here, I mean the 2012 series. I'm not going to talk in this behind the scenes too much about that because that's still not necessarily paid off or whatever. But, yeah, that was always planned to kill Casey right here. Remember, this was written 2017. Always, always, always. And that would really help bring out the Claw Island instance. So I was really happy with that. And then, not only does he die, but when we swap to a new character with this, we go to Sylvari, which is totally new as well. So this is kind of like, almost like a different series, it feels like at this point. I want to say as well, there was a really fun edit on this that not everyone caught. I think it's after the outro in the end slate. There is actually a mysterious shot in that episode hinting at what we see at the very end of the finale. And there's something really subtle in there as well, which a couple of you saw, but not many. There's a few subtle edits you guys missed. People missed. There's a subtle edit of Air's voice suggesting that we're going to go play a Norn soon, and then we don't play a Norn in one of the episodes that no one really saw until I pointed it out on a stream and people went back. But yeah, I actually have Air Stegulkin speaking as she does in the Lesser Races arc. Oh, by the way, one thing we've not talked about at all are the trailers. One of the ambitions of the series, absolutely, was to have every trailer be in it. Eventually, the Manifesto trailer wasn't, because that was more about the game. But the Races one showing Destiny's Edge, the initial trailer, the launch trailer, I think I did those all very well. It was always the plan to do the launch trailer at the start of the first episode, and then the announcement trailer at the start of the first episode, and the launch trailer at the start of the last episode. That was always planned. I think that went really well. And using the Lesser Races trailer to transition through the new characters was amazing too. So yeah, Casey dies, we start the Sylvari. Now, Sylvari in general, I'm a reasonable fan of. I think they're a cool race. I think they're unique and original, and I think the story's done about as well as the others, maybe a bit better. But I have to say, when we got to these episodes, and this was a good bit in, the series, the community really felt very, very newly invigorated by this. I don't know whether that's just ArenaNet did a really good job. I don't know whether that's my episodes did a slightly better job. I certainly didn't try to change tack in any way. But people really liked Caraflower. They really took to her and adored this section. This is when the short stories came in as well. And in a way, I think a lot of people consider Caraflower, despite the fact that she's this late in the adventure, they actually consider her to be kind of the main one. It might also be because we get such a long, unhindered, uninterrupted chunk with her. We go from level 1 to 60 and a dungeon all together on her. I remember in production when Sylvari started here. Oh, one thing that's not on the notes as well is the fact that I was soloing the dungeons, but that was also always something I knew I wanted to do. Why is that not a note? That was always something I knew to do. Here's the thing. When we got to Sylvari, it was kind of invigorating for me as well. Not because I felt the quality of anything was improving, but because it was this long, unbroken block. I had been getting really stressed out. Well, not stressed out. I don't want to make people think that this was a difficult, an upsetting or uncomfortable thing to make. I enjoy making the series. But it had been notably more difficult to do a lot of recent swapping here, and dungeon solos had taken like days of practice. So my original plans of, it's got to be really easy, I need to be doing other stuff, was really getting on top of me, and practicing these solo dungeons was like really hard. And so I got to swap to Sylvari, and I knew nothing complicated was coming. It was all plotted out for 60 levels and a dungeon worth of gameplay. All comfortable, easy Sylvari stuff. And I remember feeling really, really like comfortable and happy with that. Only for me to then overcomplicate it with the way I was doing the story lore and the Cadia and stuff. But hey, you know, we ended up splicing that in quite now. Here's what I said. With the death of the human, we start Sylvari, introduces Traherne in the most organic way possible. So yeah, this was really big as well. This was super important. I had about 1,000 reasons why I loved killing Casey here. This one was big too. Traherne has to be handled so carefully. And unfortunately, if you pick the wrong races and the wrong stories, he's not handled carefully. And that's just a consequence of the way that the game was made. But Traherne, people don't like. I think is a very well-written character when you have the whole story. And that's what this Let's Play is about, giving you the whole story. So it's carefully structured here that we know nothing of Traherne. And he's suddenly thrown at us at Claw Island. And he's suddenly introduced to Casey out of nowhere, which is what everyone experiences. So I get to honor the feeling of having Traherne thrown at us out of nowhere. And we get to indulge ourselves in that. But before the negative consequences of that truly arise, we swap to a Sylvari. And this was so important to me that it happened in this order. And we have Traherne from the start of the game. And now we get to play a load of Traherne. And now there's just a lot of goodwill engendered towards him. Okay, and then we do the Claw Island arc with Traherne at our side. So then when we do this next swap way later on an Asura and Traherne's there, it feels a bit weird. It's like, oh, okay, he's friends with Brack now. But we get the character and we know. And so, yeah, that was really important. The specific ones, we go Green Huntsman because of Hammer of Steel. Occam was going to be important later in the Pact expansion story. Well, even there, I guess I spoiled in Heart of Thorns. The Gavin arc is actually stronger, but this will create a more coherent story. It's a hard choice, but coherency wins. This happened a lot. And when I say this, I will have really, really been gritting my teeth to get rid of the Gavin arc. I think I remember the Gavin arc as being a really good one. Is this the one where Kaith, and I will have known it perfectly as I've written this, where you get the really dark side to Kaith, and she, like, quite indiscriminately, like, kills Nightmare Court, like she doesn't even really care much. Gavin arc obviously is where you get a friend, a really nice guy who's at your side, and it's like, oh, he's a sweet guy, and then he turns out to be Nightmare Court, and you realize that not everyone on the other side of the fence is straight up evil. That's so important, especially for Heart of Thorns. Really powerful arc, but coherency with Occam I went with instead. And hopefully that feels worth it right now as we sit here having just seen the finale with Occam there and not Gavin there in the finale, in the end instance, the celebration and stuff. But yeah, coherency was the main thing. We take Act with Wisdom because it introduces Karis and Tegwin. So yeah, these guys, amazing, right? They're like Kekt. You get them so many throughout the game, and I wanted to make sure you got their whole story. Obviously, one of them freaking dies, and you should feel something with that. And I made an interesting decision with that as well. I even mentioned it in the series. We chose not to have Caraflower see the death of Tegwin. We went the other way to keep her with her order, but we could have reversed that just as easily. We get to visit Orr in an earlier vision that's fun. Another good one is obviously Where Life Goes. So this is the Malik story. This is like the Infinity Ball thing. It's kind of a bonus series Here you go. And by now, I've already decided I want to do the bonus sections. We play Chapter 3 because it's a great story. This is the only Order story that's genuinely really good to me. I mean, all the stuff with Rihanna, come on, it's great. I remember the Arena episode fighting over Caladbolg as being another one of those really nuisance episodes that probably isn't apparent watching. We choose Priory because it's the most recent in our minds and the human just failed at it. Right, and we need to replace the human. We need to replace that Priory branch, right? So the montage here was really good. This was where I learned that if you do the montage with the music in the background, it can work very well. So I montaged that entire thing on super speed. A technique So what you see in the video there is the whole chapter at ultra fast speed, but all the gameplay is there. And that's what I wanted to do with Ulfric way later in the series when he goes from the Grawl arc all the way up to Romkay. I thought that would be amazing to have literally the whole game in a super fast. But as I was recording, I accidentally caught some alt tabs while I was doing it because it was like a whole day's gameplay to... Like, this is a bit like when I played Final Fantasy X. I beat the whole game in that episode, like the entire series, and, you know, there won't be much response or critical thinking from the community on that, I don't think, because the edit is just, oh, look, the happy transition, we're at the end now. But, you know, that's a whole day of playing the game, like, sitting down and going through. And I recorded it all, but with the alt tabs, then I had to keep, like, piecemeal removing them, and I didn't like the idea of someone, like, freeze framing at the right time, and I didn't want to go through. So in the end, I didn't do it. Also, even at super speed, beating basically the whole game on the Norn, it would have looked like such a blur and so moving so fast that the effect wouldn't have been as good as it was back here when we saw Caraflower going through the Priory stuff. Also, sneakily, she takes the separate option there. Instead of going to the Priory to do the experiment, she goes to the lake to recover the Dwarven stuff. And you can catch that in the background if you're watching very closely while the music plays. Good excuse to use the Dermot Priory OST, which is some of my favourite music, and the finale ends with that. Well, it ends with Fear Not This Night, but before that, it's the Priory thing as Ulfric returns there. We picked the Skrit as her lesser race. I guess my reasoning for this isn't established here. But again, this worked really well in the end, because we got to unify the Fowlane and Kaith Destroyer Burning Village conversation with the Skrit Destroyer Burning Village. Short stories. We played Twilight Arbor. Twilight Arbor was a really good dungeon for me because it was easy compared to the other ones. The other ones were like high intensity, lots of kiting, crazy amount of work to figure out how to solo. Twilight Arbor, I just found a perfectly tanky build because Necro is just so strong. It's such a powerful class. And it's slow and attritive, but it could get through. So the actual shooting of the dungeon I knew would take a long time, but there was basically no practice required. So that was really good. We kick back up at the gates with, you know, the death of Siren. But this time we run to the boat and we survive. And the Casey thing is concluded. So this whole section here from the death of Casey, I think was a really powerful part of the series, honestly. And it's nice to say that there's a powerful part of the series in what is essentially the middle. We complete Claw Island, but don't do the last mission. So yeah, this was really tricky as well. Resynchronizing all three of our characters' stories to be at the right place with Claw Island. So here I knew I had to do everything but not Retribution. And we would choose whether we make someone suffer. This had the really big Ore vision as well, where we return to Ore as the Pale Tree imagines it. There was lots of like cut dialogue there that I wanted to show you guys. That as well, that's a bit like when you first join an order, a really big moment of the story to me. I think that there's so much cool dialogue there. And now that we'd seen every race except Norn, it was really cool to me to see how everyone could reconcile all the members of Destiny's Edge pretty much, except Air. And we knew Air was the leader, but we didn't know anything else. And I actually really liked her in that position. It's easy to buy she's the leader without many specifics about her. It's just like, oh, she's a great hero, right? Which is very much in tune with the Norn. The Norn response from the community at this point was at fever pitch. Now, let me just be clear. I'm going to scroll down here. Okay, where is it? Here. Okay, Norn. This is right down on the list, okay? These are my justifications for doing Norn. We'll get to this later. But look at reason number 2. This was written in 2017, okay? Norn stuff... Oh, wait. No, not that one. Where is it? Sorry. Here. Yeah, no, this is definitely it. The Norn stuff isn't that good. But leaving it right to the last hour will whip people into a frenzy of wondering where it is, making it exciting and fun to finally do, completely irrespective of the content itself. I won't tease anyone on the subject, I'll just be silent about it. It was always the plan to do the Norn right at the end, and I knew that people would start thinking, well, hold on, he's done this and this and this, where's the Norn? Where are the Norn? I knew that they'd start doing it, and it was at this point now, after we're getting to the end of Retribution, that people were asking for it a lot, and I think that was really fun to start seeing. Like, this would have been a point to go to Norn, and it didn't happen. And people start saying, oh, WP's not doing it because he doesn't like the Norn. I always knew I wanted to. And yeah, like, I really do believe that the Norn story isn't that good. It's okay, but people would be nostalgic about it, and just, like, the payoff, just waiting, just making you wait for it for that long and wonder about it for that long, and then finally you get the payoff. That excitement was enough to ride through all the episodes. So that was my way of doing it, and we'll go back to that later. But yeah, the Norn stuff, pretty reaching fever pitch here. Well, not fever pitch, but people are asking for it a lot. We go to the Asura. Speak to Dermot Priory NPC for... Oh, yeah, it's weird that this is like for the other notepad, really. Yeah, if you're an Order of Whispers and you speak to the NPC about the five dragons, they mentioned the 5 against 6, right, and stuff, and I wanted to make sure I'd included that. We return to the Order of Whispers with the Asura as we hang out with the Hylek. Yeah, he's got the Hylek connection to the alchemy from being an engineer. We play the Order of Whispers perspective, or for the Battle of Claw Island, we skipped the first Claw Island instance itself except to show I'm meant to die, and that became a montage. The Asura is scared of making an innocent die. Obviously, it's different here, and it's all Asura heavy stuff. We cut right before the final instance with Claw Island arc. So again, we're cutting here at the same time here, right? So these two are now synchronized back to the char, and you'll notice we go Sylvari, Asura, char. Sylvari, Asura, but, you know, sometimes it goes awkward, so here we're back to the Asura, right? Because of the dungeons, right? Because SE comes up. And we're trying to find that right balance. That's why the montage of playtime in the finale is really interesting to see, isn't it? That Bract had so much more... Was it Bract had a lot more hours than the others? Like, by 10. Everyone was around 40 hours. To beat Guild Wars 2 properly... Sans leveling, there wasn't even any leveling, but to beat the story properly, sans leveling is about a 40-hour game. You can't say that's bad lengthwise. And that's what I wanted for the expansion lengths, to be honest, way back when. Anyway, Char, so now we see the Vigil story. And we hadn't even started Vigil. Vigil was the first one we join. And it's the last one we get to. We play it in one big long block, spend a lot of time at Ascalon. We do the Ogres, spend time at Ascalon as much as possible. And then we get the Dragon Kills start coming on. So, the Shatterer bonus. What can I say about these? Over the years, whenever I've done videos that include other people, if they're long-term projects, I always find it quite stressful balancing schedules and, you know, just juggling more stuff. I think I work better alone and according to my own timetables and schedules and with a bit of freedom. And this was scary to me. I knew I wanted to do the 3 Dragon Kills, and I knew I wanted them to be with the community, and I wanted to show off the commanding side of the game and the large-scale metas. I knew I wanted to do that. And I knew if I was going to do that, there was no way I was going to do it with randoms. I was going to do it with the guild, and I was going to do it with the people watching the videos and the people I care about most. So we were going to do it as a Spud Club thing. So that was all fine, and I knew I wanted to do it, and I knew there was going to be 3 episodes at the start. The Shatterer one was pretty much fine. It was fun. Everyone got on board with it. There was a stream, but as we were setting it up, that you won't see on the series. But if you go to my second channel, WP2, you can catch those streams somewhere on there, where we were setting up and all the preamble and about, you know, making sure people weren't mounting and using the core specializations and stuff. It was a lot of fun, but it was, you know, hours and hours of extra energy, again, onto just one video out of this huge series. But it was okay. It didn't really burn me out much. The later ones burnt me out a bit more. And then... we got to Ore, and again, I kept bloating the series, and what I thought would be really fun is to do those big squad-based Zergs for everything now. do it for all the invasions in the Straits of Devastation, and do it for all the temples, and so on and so on and so on. And it was a bad idea at that point. A bad idea. It was way too much work and effort. The series started stalling majorly, and a lot of it was when those Straits of Devastation large group meta events were not a good idea. When we came to doing the Southern Invasion, I think the last one, I tried to set it up. We spent ages setting up, getting everyone together, and then when we finally got into the map, the invasion had already been pushed, and we couldn't open another server to get it to unpush. We just couldn't do it. And all I wanted was to do the video. It was really, really not a pleasant one. So in the end, I kind of ended up culling that away. And the Deborah series, Deborah was supposed to be all about that stuff. All of her stuff would be big community-related things. But in the end, I just couldn't do it. So what I settled on in the end was, when it came to recording the episode, I did the temples. We went to do Balthazar and Grentham Melandra and stuff. But as I did those, I just typed in guild chat. And the people that were there, and they had the opportunity to come. And the people that were in Discord at the time could come. But I never made big events out of them anymore. This is still a big question on my mind for upcoming content as well. Because increasingly, the game starts relying on these open world aspects. But that's not behind the scenes for what we've currently done. So I'll stop there. Moving on. We choose the Gear Warband, not Fibhar. Did I? Why do I remember doing Fibhar then? Oh no, we definitely did choose the Gear Warband. The Char is dishonoring their allies because it would take... I think this is probably just because of the cohesion with Char stuff, by the way. We dishonor our allies. That's the last one. And this lines up really well, right? You get the Asura stuff and the demolition with the engineer of the Asura with his explosives. You get the Sylvari doing stuff to do with dragon corruption and a Pacia's fate and stuff to do with the crate, which she also had been interacting with earlier. You get the Char dealing with the massive, march-long assaults and commanding and, dishonor to, failing in the scope of the theater of war, going back to Ascalon. Like, this is so perfect. These three characters with their backstories, with these three greatest fears is amazing. And, I had to have this penned out. I had to know all of this at the start, because otherwise, like, way back up here, as the Sylvari is scheduling to do this, she says the wrong thing, then it all falls apart, which is why I was excited to have this all planned out. The Vigil finally being the ones to deal the Death Blood. Yeah, I like the idea of the Vigil being the ones that actually do Retribution. Then we get the Asura finishes Retribution and gets their version with the Vacuum Magic Sucker and Gore. This was interesting because I had to montage Retribution, but also show the differences, because there were a lot of differences based on who you chose, what order you were with, and who your allies were and stuff. And there was some interesting nuance there. I think I hit an okay balance, but I think this is where I was getting the messages, like, oh, it's too much backtracking. We do Forge in the Pact. So this is the furthest the story ever got. A really long instance, by the way. And I knew that going into it, but my God. And then you get the mail about Sorrows Embrace. There's a lot going on with mails here as well. At one point on one of these characters, for this instance, I act as though I'm reading a mail from Logan. But it would be impossible for me to be reading that mail from Logan because I'm not on a human. So what I'm actually doing is, like, editing an old mail in and, like, I'm spoofing it and, like, it's all fake. But I'm doing it there. Also, you have to start holding some mails off. I think Bract gets a mail around now. Or maybe it was Tyrix gets a mail. And I literally cannot read it until after the Temple of the Forgotten God. Because otherwise it spoils, like, story for way later. It's so bad. We do Dishonor My Allies. This is an excellent starting arc because it shows the wonky, newly formed pack struggling logistically. Yeah, it got kind of weird here because we basically do one really long instance and a dungeon, and that's it. But we kind of pad it out with some other stuff, and then we swap again very fast. But you kind of have to do it this way to get Bract in on the Sorrows Embrace. Actually, I'll tell you the truth. I think this bit here has been edited since the notepad was creation. There are a couple of places where I edited this afterwards. Mostly it's intact, but there are some. I think originally Bract was not inserted into the middle of this. I think it was all Char. It was do the Vigil story, come all the way along, and then Bract would appear all the way down here or something. But I realized I had to shift it up. And I had to shift it up to get the dragons aligned properly. I think was essentially what was going on there. I don't know. So, yeah, we see the Granite Citadel. We do Forge in the Pack. We make our first Ascended gear. We played this. I like the idea of getting Ascended gear before level 8 as well, just to express to people it is end game gear only. I think that was a good way of articulating that. We dishonor our allies, and yeah, we've just seen the pact form, and now we do the best arc showing that they're trying to get their left and their right hand together. The other failure points don't show that at all. And again, this is the kind of thing where if you watch my series, it all kind of just makes sense and that flows together nicely. But for other players, it wouldn't at all, because you might never even see this arc, you know? Continues to enforce that Zaitan is smart because of his mesmers. We read Ritlock's mail after the montage, and that's for doing the dungeon soon. During this time, we travel through the Iron Marches. We do the Flame Legion meta event there. We explore the Fields of Ruin. Remember, we've gone to Ascalon near the dungeon because of this story arc, and then we get to play the dungeon soon. We play up to the Battle of Fort Trinity, but starting the battle, we cut to, and kind of Battle for Fort Trinity is like the next Retribution, right? So it's kind of a sticking point that people pivot around a lot. So we kick back off with the defense of the Priory. We reclaim Claw Island, showing off the Karis Tegwin Pale Reaver version. We make another Suffer, but skip the first instance because we did it on Bract. But we show Occam and reuniting with him. We show Kate's mail that we get. We intercept the orb, which actually had less dialogue, but was more impactful as an instance because you get the blood and a more realistic plan. Yeah, this was the instance where Apatia's gone missing, right? Because you split up. And they do that cool thing where you can interact with a blood trail on the ground as it leads to the water. That's way more powerful than the other version. We beat the battle for Fort Trinity, and we conclude the full arc with liberating Apatia. So then Fort Trinity's done. Bract is now the one that's behind. We play her, and look at all these decisions we have to make here, right? We explore... So no one had been to Sparkfly at this point. So Bract goes to Sparkfly. This is the only time you really see it. He gets to hang out with the Hylic on the way there, and he gets to see the beaded weapons and stuff. I thought that was really good. He's got such a cool Hylic through line, and he takes out to Court of the Sunless. We successfully clear the battle for Fort Trinity and do a sad duty. We do the pre-instance for the Temple of Forgotten God. Here we get a mail. We do not read. It is poison. It vaguely refers to COE, and it's totally timeline breaking. So I all caps that to make sure that's right. We do Straits of Devastation meta North route. On our way, and you'll notice this doesn't say as a community event, but it eventually becomes a community event. We enter the temple, but cut to the Char. We catch back up. We do Temple of the Forgotten Gods. Yeah, so the mail here, when you do the pre-instance, is Ritlock describing how he's going alone from Destiny's Edge, which does line up, but the equivalent, if you're an Asura, doesn't line up. So it's kind of weird. So yeah, we read his one, we do the temple, we do one of the assaults, and then the Herald messages us about Northern Ascalon. We go to Northern Ascalon. So early game for Tyrix, I did do some of this dialogue that talks about Geheran Balefire, but it was so long ago that people would have forgotten. So the idea here was actually to return to Diessa and do the mini dungeon with like Geheran's crony and acolyte and stuff. And I don't think they got in the end, right? Because there was just this was where things were getting really difficult to balance the community events of the things with the dungeon solos and whatever else. I think this was also around Halloween that these were coming. And Halloween was my first tentative at the start timeline for finishing the series. Had I managed to adhere to the first sentence and made it really basic and simple, I could have finished by Halloween. I could, 100 days, 100 whatever, 150 days, it would have been Halloween or so. But because they'd been getting more complicated, we actually got an average of an episode every 2 days and a half-ish instead of every day. So it ended up a lot longer, and I was kind of frustrated at myself, and this was a real bad time for me, real life-wise as well, and I kind of, around now, I think I took a month off entirely from a lot of stuff. I don't think I streamed for a month, a lot of things. So then we get back into it, and Southern Invasion's going to be going on here. We've got Silvari, and we do Honor of the Waves. This was a really fun dungeon. We're not there yet. We do Victory or Death, Temple of Forgotten Gods. We have a different introduction to Saya because she's already met Saya. We skip a lot of stuff. We do the mirror plan. Obviously, she's seen the mirror before, so this was really nice. And now we're really at the final part, right? Straits of Devastation South and final. We do through the Looking Glass, where you get to interact with the mirror. And also, this is just the most exciting version of that, where you get lost in awe and your lesser race saves you. Do what the eye beholds. I'm just using the names of the story instances now, so unless you guys are real experts on this, you might not know what I'm referring to anymore. Estate of Decay. This isn't Malka's Leap, but just a short walk from the central waypoint of Straits, which we have visited at the end of each original meta. It's very important to preserve an intelligent progression through ore here, mixing story with metas. The reason I have this written is because the various interactions of the personal story can lead you leapfrogging and yo-yoing all over, and I really wanted to present the sense it's an adventure where we go deeper into the world, right? That's what I really wanted to sense. I didn't want to do a mission that was really deep in Malkor's. I need to return to a mission that was earlier in Malkor's afterwards, you know? To an extent, we kind of end up doing that a bit on different characters, but that's sort of excusable. Next, we choose the Ossuary of Unquiet Dead, because it has awesome lore, and we want that. Also, Brak for naval stuff. So this was a new thing that I'd actually added. The naval subplot for Brak was something that only occurred to me as I was playing, where you see that, like, the guy that attacks the Order of Whispers during the Claw Island arc is, like, an admiral. And, like, there's lots of little things about Brak's story that had that, so I kind of added that there. We participate in the road meta for Malkor's Leap to get there. And yeah, the metas continue. But here, this is like the last meta we do that isn't Deborah related. This was really tricky. First meta is called Pack Troops Move Out, and this was so that I could wiki it later. The trivia of Neelan and the boss, so that I didn't forget for the actual notepad. We play further into ore. We choose Priory. We read the Herald Mail. We do Run of the Waves. And then the Claw of Jormag while we're up there with the Coden. Coden Lesser Race stories are here. That would have all been information from the other things. Can't really remember any particular trivia about that. The Asura then comes through. The Hylic, he gets rescued. So this is actually kind of funny. There's a little bit of Hylic dialogue missing from the game as a lesser race. You never actually saw Bract do the Source of Ore. You saw everyone else do the Source of Ore. That's the final personal story mission before the dungeon. But you never saw Bract do it. You know everything that happens there, but you don't know what the Hylic dialogue is there. So, in the finale, there are actually 4 hidden one-frame images showing off that Bract dialogue in the finale from the Source of Ore. I'll leave it to you guys to find them or talk about where they are if you like. But, yeah, so all the information is there, but you never actually see that in-game. I've skipped ahead a bit here with that anecdote, but yeah. This time we starve them out. Basically, we're just juggling the instances so that it's always new stories you're seeing associated best with the characters that are doing them. Brak chooses Whispers, more naval stuff. And yeah, Iknu, you get the double up. So Casey was the one that did Quaggan, and Casey is dead. So Shushadu appears in this instance as well. Baruch, sorry. Baruch was, yeah, Shushadu and Baruch are in that story, right? But anyway, so, yeah, we don't get Casey here, but we do get Ignu. You get the Char going through Vigil Plan. The Char does the Vigil Plan first this time. They were the last ones to do Retribution Beta. This time they're the first ones at this later juncture. And, yeah, okay, so I guess this is written pretty loosely here. But yeah, so I always knew I wanted Deborah. Deborah was an opportunity to show the other human stories that will be more relevant for Season 2. Season 2's got, like, some cool party scenes and stuff that it's going to be... So it's good to have that information about the Confessor and the White Mantle and stuff fresh. So I wanted to do that. The whole idea, and I don't know whether I did this well enough, is that they were both at an orphanage, Deborah and Casey. Deborah gets adopted... or leaves, maybe she never gets adopted, and she just ends up among the common folk. But then Casey gets adopted out among the nobility, right? That's the idea after Deborah's gone missing. So Deborah goes missing with the Falcons, and then Casey comes up. So I thought this was really creative, really fun. And I knew it was going to be a big moment revealing Deborah because, again, it's been setting up expectations. We've been in a real, not a rut, but we've been in an order here, and everyone thinks it's one character or two characters, And the only thing you can possibly imagine, if I'm going to make another new character, it's going to be a Norn, right? There's no way WP is going to do anything except making another Norn. And then I do the ending to that video, and we are on Deborah, and, like, it's like a double expectation. I really, really liked what I did there, basically. And the editing actually works very well, too. These episodes had a lot of telegraphing and fun stuff going on. So, for example, the episode opens with the human character creator. and like a little montage of starting playing a human. Now, it's in first person, and you can't see what class it is, so it's like, oh, what is this? And what it's doing is it's showing Corporal Byrne and some of those early NPCs, Priestess and Marla. That's the opening to the episode, and then as the episode goes along, you're wondering, why has he opened it like that? Is he going to play a human? But then in the episode, you see Corporal Byrne returns, and Priestess and Marla, and all these older NPCs are back. So then you're like, okay, WP opened the episode with the Corporal Byrne stuff, because that's now relevant for the story. Cool, that was good of him. And so you think the matter is settled. Then you go through, Corporal Byrne dies, and the episode ends, and the personal story thing starts again. And so you start thinking, well, hold on, why is the story starting again? I thought that flashback was just a Casey flashback, so we remember these characters. And it's just beautifully stitched together, because at the start, you get the start of the character creator, and then at the end, you get the specific nitty-gritties of the character creator. And you realize, hold on, this is a female voice. And hold on, she's talking about being among the common folk, not the nobility. And why are we watching this? And all of a sudden she stands up, and as it dawns on you and you open your eyes, you realize that there's a lot of misdirection that was going on there, and I had a lot of fun making that. And I thought that worked out way better than even I'd imagined in this notepad here. Especially with the music of the intro cutscene managing to segue in. And yeah, I was really careful about having the nameplate visible, and the class needed to be correctly visible. Some of that still is actually ongoing. The way I describe characters, what class I describe them with, or whether I use it at all, particularly in the finale, is of relevance. Okay, so anyway, yeah. The stinger of Deborah waking up. And then we got Deborah. She's Seraph turned Vigil, starting Divinity's Reach. Now, it has to be short. It has to be, because you cannot break it. So I choose 4 videos to do a lot of stuff. Bonus, and I'm very, very excited with how well this worked, because it seemed overly ambitious to me, and usually if I think something's overly ambitious, it's definitely overly ambitious, but this actually wasn't. An entire chapter in a single video. Oh, hold on, there's a little thing to say here. I had that break, right? And when I came back to the series, I sort of thought to myself, look, the LP has become too ludicrous to make. I need to return to that top line. It needs to be simple. So I came back, and I actually did. There is an episode in early Ore stuff, where I'm near the airship. I think I'm on Caraflower or something. And I say to everyone, listen, the series might have more episodes than I was planning. I'm really sorry, but we're not going to have hour-long episodes anymore. We're going to have like half-an-hour episodes, and they're going to be a bit more basic. I'm really sorry, everyone. I'm really sorry, but you know, I've got to like simplify the series. Do you remember when I said that? That obviously never happened. That only happened for like a couple of episodes, and then I was full-on obsessed with it again and doing all the work again as much as I wanted and trying to make it as perfect as possible. So that never happened. But what that meant is the series was about 3 episodes longer than I wanted it to be, which meant that now when we had the Deborah thing, this was supposed to be episode 100. And I got it on episode 100 in the end, which I'm really happy with. But the only way I managed to make this episode 100 is the Char episode before this. This is all one episode. The entire Vigil plan, the entire chapter is one episode. Like, there's a ton squeezed into this to make amends for my slowing down a couple of days earlier on, where I attempted to simplify the series and then didn't do it in the end. So, yeah, so we did a whole chapter in one episode, and then I managed to sustain that. We do a whole chapter here, the opening story, bonus 1. Also, this is an opportunity to show what level 80 gameplay looked like at low levels. And also, this was an opportunity to show the Serentine short story. So this was really nice. When we were first playing Casey, the short stories weren't around. And then when we get to the short stories, it's when we're on the Sylvari, but the Sylvari only appears after Casey dies. So what's our opportunity to get the human short stories? If I want to boil the frog and I want to do the Serentine short stories, how do I do those? Well, we do it with Deborah, who coincidentally also is doing the stories that also revolve around Serentine. So you're hearing the Serentine short stories with a character playing Serentine late enough in the series that people will actually listen to the short stories instead of immediately turn the videos off. How perfect is that, man? So good. And yeah, we cut them up. These are actually bookended with short stories as well. We open and end because instead of 8 episodes on this, there's just 4. So yeah, I guess this is a bit of a spoiler, but whatever. We're doing the commoner story instead of the streets story because we get thrown in prison and this becomes relevant in the story later. The bonus too was Never Knew Our Parents, just to make the actual Casey story work. And the White Mantle details are obviously important. We don't, bonus 3, we don't need to see her do the whole personal story. In fact, her entire story is not even really doing the personal story. It's ArenaNet's story for her, which is that she joined Vigil and then packed, right? Okay, and then we're on to her doing metas, which is what she's all about. She's a character for meta events. That's the idea, and that's how she slots in. A support character for meta events. She gets to show another aspect of the gameplay that otherwise we hadn't. You notice none of the plotting for builds, and when I show you skill categories and try new types of characters, and this is what a Condi build looks like, and this is what a Glass build looks like, none of that is on this. That's all from the other notepads. So yeah, we do Balthazar first, then we do Lissa. Oh, by the way, the god she favored is relevant for later. And then the Dwayne meta. That leaves just a couple more. We go back to the regular characters here. The Order of Whispers plan is completed. Finally, we read the Poisonous Mail right here at the end. The pacing of the dungeons is really nice as well. Like, when you play it as a regular player, it kind of feels like the dungeons are well paced, and then all of a sudden at the end of the game, you get 3 at once. It's like dungeon, dungeon, dungeon. It's like Honor of the Waves, COE, Hurrah, all together really quickly. But in actual truth, the way that it's plotted out is they're much more separate than that. And the way that we did the series, I can properly show that, and I think I did that very well. Honor of the Waves did feel reasonably distant to the Crucible, which felt reasonably distant to the finale. We played Crucible of Eternity and finished Kudu. This was a very difficult dungeon. By the way, I think the most difficult dungeon in the end might have been Caudicus's Manor. Honor of the Waves is pretty hard, but once you found the correct cheese strats, it was possible. Like, there was a lot really difficult about that if you didn't cheese it with the right kind of terrain stuff. But CM was probably the one I struggled with most in terms of practice and stuff. Which makes sense for why I was so happy to go to a long Silvari block before doing Twilight Arbor. We leave the Shiver Peaks, and we've done the final dragon here as well. We did that earlier. We completed the Priory plan. Go back to the human for Melandru and Grenth. Oh, yeah. So, by the way, we do Against the Corruption, which was Traherne's first attempt to cleanse on Caraflower, because I feel like they have the closest bond, and they knew the most together from that. There's a huge rant that is not included in the series here about how terrible I think the story is plotted for Against the Corruption. A lot of people think the Glory of Tyria is the biggest Deus Ex Machina and the worst, like, sudden solution to a problem. It's actually this. Traherne's Wild Hunt is just suddenly manufactured. Oh, we found a ritual, let's go. That's it. They don't even have, like, in the prior mission, people talking about it. At least the Glory of Tyria has in the Source of Ore, some people saying, the Glory of Tyria is not ready, blah, blah, blah. At least it has that. The Traherne Wild Hunt cleanse is awful. But I suppose that's fine, because the consequence of Ore being cleansed to this day hasn't been properly shown. And then the human, we return to, almost for the last time. We're right at the end now, guys. So, Against the Corruption on Bract. Bract does Cathedral of Silence to pay off on the very old energy detector. We get to note the human necromancer we eventually did. Or might have done in a bonus series. We enter the final instance and cut to Caraflower. You know, I would have thought I'd have a lot more to say here, since this is all stuff I did recently. We enter Fort Trinity. Trivia about Guild Wars 3 showing the Champion of All. Oh, yeah. Did I mention that in the end? I might not have. Basically, the idea is I think Guild Wars 3 would be really cool if you get to play as a Champion of Ore, a real one from in the past. The human bonus of the Gates of Arar comes now. Okay, now this bit's really interesting. How we transition to the Norns. So here's what I wanted to do, okay? This is about one of the short stories, by the way. I started being very clear about what I wanted to do with these here. And what sections of things I wanted. After I got Edge of Destiny, I might have added this in. Permissions. What was supposed to happen is we choose Romke's Final Voyage. We play Romke's Final Voyage. And right at the start, when you get Norn-specific audio, I was going to glitch the screen and have him talk about being a descendant and then glitch back. And people would be like, what? That's weird. And really eagle-eyed people would have noticed. And then for the big surprise at the end of the episode, it would have been revealed, right? And we complete Romke's Final Voyage, do the Fort Trinity instance, and we're ready for the Norn, right? The video ends as we enter Ara, and I remark that it's nice to see Destiny's Edge together at last, so let's enjoy this second trailer in full for one last time. I did that exactly. Air speaks, and we would hard cut to Guild Wars 2 has 5 races and close the video. And I knew people would be really excited. This was supposed to be a bigger moment than the Deborah moment, but in the end, I actually think the Deborah moment turned out better. Or people responded to the Deborah moment more, which is really weird, because this one had been set up for so much longer. I'd been not teasing, I'd just been waiting for the Norn until now, and people would be really, really excited. This was like supposed to be one of the big bombshells that we were gonna do Norn right at the end of the road. The ultimate, like, and it's not necessarily trolling, it's just the most extreme way I could imagine doing it, right? And we go back to Norn at the end. But here's the thing, with the Romka's final voyage, this was supposed to be like a telegraph. If I could redo this, I would actually change things now. I would have had Tyrix also do the Temple of the Forgotten God. I would have justified it as, oh, he's curious about the gods because he's always hated them, so he wants to be sure that they're idiots and they've been corrupted or something. I would have, you know, rationalized it whatever dumb way I wanted to, as I have throughout the entire series. With every decision, I've made it seem like the decision is made by the character, but in truth, it's made by the master plan. I would have done that, and the reason why is so that when we finish when we finish Ulfric's, have I been calling him Romke the whole time? When we finish Ulfric's story, we have something new to see. Yeah, we would have had the whole new Romke's final voyage. As it stands, I'm not actually happy with how the Norn, moment ends, because we kind of had already seen it on Tyrix and it didn't work so well. So I actually would have tweaked that, but that was the idea that Tyrix would introduce you to this guy, and then we would come back and actually see the Horn and the Descendant and stuff. I still think it's good overall how it all worked out, and I hope people really enjoyed it. The challenge with the Norn, once again, was like the Deborah challenge. We've set up so much here, and I'm actually still worried I might not have done this very well. The last episodes here, they've got like those Edge of Destiny clips of like people's last moments, and like the Edge of Destiny clip of Snaf dying in their last attack. Like, that's a powerful piece to throw in an audience's face right before we enter Ara, right? Oh yeah, you're going to fight an Elder Dragon? Well, let's read this horrible, gruesome passage about what happened the last time Destiny's Edge tried to fight an Elder Dragon. But that's awesome. So I did all of that, and the game does very good as well, I think, in that mission before the final dungeon at Fort Trinity, with the glory of Tyria not being ready yet, and everyone in that like intense music and the lesser races standing around and stuff. It does a lot to build this moment, and then I snatch it away from you. And of course, that's the fun, to snatch it away. But then I've got a real job to not lose the plot completely. We've got to get back there soon. But we've also got to do Norn properly. Ulfric is not Deborah. Ulfric is a main... These aren't bonus videos. This is the real deal. So finding that balance is really difficult. Here's what I said way back in 2017. The class will be a ranger. Everyone will want to see a Norn ranger most, I said. I actually had a few comments people wanted to see a Mesmer, strangely. But hey. Gender is probably male. Some people wanted to see female because they thought I was matching my characters to the Edge of Destiny's genders. I didn't really do that. I'm not against playing female characters at all. And most of my... Well, maybe not most. A lot of my characters are female. My main for a long time was a female. But it just felt better to do a male Norn to me here. It really did. I don't know why. I really love the voice acting. That's Matthew Mercer, isn't it? So anyway, obviously the connection here is Romke, right? But we do the Norn this late and last because, number one, in general, it's not that essential to the story, and to do all 5 too early will bog things down too much. We can't ask people to watch 60 plus videos to finally get to reclaiming Claw Island, can we? And then in 2018, I guess in summer last year, I edited this in, that was hilarious, because I guess we were at that point now at Claw Island around then, and I think it was... How many episodes was it there? I think it was 60 episodes. Wasn't it part 60, Retribution, part 60? So that made me laugh, because I wrote this as an extreme thing, like, no way people are going to watch 60 episodes to reclaim Claw Island. We can't do Norn. I didn't do Norn, and it took that many episodes anyway. There was another weird thing as well, by the way. It was like episode 51 that the Pale Tree gives us the vision of cleansing ore, and then it was double that exactly. It was like episode 102 that we do it with Traherne. We cleanse all with Traherne. Like, we go to Azabe Kabar, like, double the episodes after, which I think is kind of amazing as well. Because you think of that vision as being quite late game, but it's really not. So anyway, that was number one. That was reason number one why the Norn had to come last. I couldn't bag it down, guys. It would have been too bottom heavy if we did so many, and we kept resetting, as I discussed earlier in this video. Then there's this one, which I already read, that the Norn stuff's just not that good. I don't think it's that good. At least it's okay, and I know a lot of you have nostalgia, and I'm not actually as big of a Norn hater as a lot of people think I am. But what I really lament is that it's not as good as it could have been. And the Norn were amazing in Guild Wars 1, and I feel like they were very much Flanderized in the sequel. And it's not just about being Flanderized, by the way. The LP has given me a new perspective on this. It's just time crunch. It's just acts like the Chapter 3 arc, and they just don't have enough to them. There just wasn't enough time, and not enough dialogue, and not enough substance to the missions, because the devs were making 5 games at once. More than that. Okay, next, I've just edited some stuff out down here for the future story, which is another reason. But leaving Air, the leader of Destiny's Edge, in the dark makes her seem somewhat more special to me, which she deserves to be, and the game doesn't exactly highlight well enough. I still stand by that. Here, leaving Air's story till really late makes her very fresh in our minds, as close as possible to the first expansion, where I want people to feel impact from something. So that was another reason I did it. And lastly, showing her backstory will be interesting, having recently completed Honor of the Waves. This one didn't really work so well in the end, but hey. So there you go. And then we got the Norn. This is what we chose. We defeat our ancient foes so that we can meet Bagar. Same as the Occam principle with the Sylvari. Has Scarlet stuff upcoming. Fergan is the guy that gets corrupted. Fergan I actually never ended up seeing. He's in a different story, so that bit didn't work. We select Lost Heirloom because of Romke's last voyage. It does mean we miss out on the Gear Warband, which is a shame because they have a lot of relevance. Again, they're one of the very minor casualties, but I mean, they have to come somewhere in the way that I plotted my playthrough. We show joining the Priory on Chapter 3 because of Ogden. Yeah, for a long time, I wasn't going to show the Chapter 3 because this has got to be tight, right? But we have to because Ogden, right? And here's the other thing with Ogden. Ogden is going to be relevant in the upcoming videos I'll be making soon about Arras Explorable. So having Ogden late and then Ogden comes back very soon, I think that works perfectly for people who go one series into the next. We do Grawl last because it's the last minor race and it's Norny in terms of where we go. And yeah, and then this was putting out the videos. This actually ended up a little bit tighter than this, I think, in the end. It was 3 videos on Ancient Foes because one was Character Creator and then 2. And then I think it was 3. No, I think this was 2 and then it was 2, 2, 2 in the end. We skip everything else, showing all of Air's missives over the story in male form up until Romke's final voyage. We mentioned Gretchen, the spirits of the sorrow. Everything that has to be mentioned, we do. Okay, and then there was this. This never happened either. The idea was to make so many videos so quickly that I'd have a big backlog. And then what I could do is on Tyrix's episode, where he was doing Romke's last final voyage, I wanted sitting somewhere, sneakily in the background, Ulfric Romkeson. So that people who watch the series through a second time will see that Easter egg and they'll be like, what? Ulfric was in an episode before he was even made? He's there and all. I wanted to do all of that. But in the end, so in the end, this didn't happen. And one of the main reasons it didn't happen is I did create a big backlog. And people who follow me on Patreon could watch episodes like a month before they came out for everyone else. Honestly, they had like tons of videos they could watch but over regular YouTube watchers because I had such a big backlog, and this was a possibility. However, when I made one of these episodes, I think it was one of the Lost Heirloom episodes, I edited it, I posted it, and it was supposed to be private. I went to bed for the night. I woke up that next morning, and when I looked at YouTube, I saw it hadn't been private. Instead, the episode had just gone live with no thumbnail, a placeholder name, and it was something like 20 episodes off in the future, 30 episodes off in the future, and it spoiled this entire thing with the Norn. And I think that might be a reason why that wasn't as exciting to people as the Deborah one. It spoiled the whole thing. Everyone realized I would be playing Norn in X episodes later. And I get that some people found that fun and stuff, and they like things leaking, but that really, really sucked. And I kind of just stepped away from the series for a bit there. I knew I had videos. No one would see any break because I had all these videos in a backlog. But I ended up stepping away. I was just so bummed out by it, guys. I know that that's not a healthy thing to do. I focused on other work. I just did other projects, right? So, yeah, that was really, really lame. And what it meant was that Ulfric hadn't completed his adventure by the time Tyrix's episode went up, funnily enough. So this was now impossible to implement. And, it was a bit unfortunate there with that. I will say, though, there was another thing I got in. There is still an Easter egg like this. I don't know whether I saw anyone comment on this at all. In one of the episodes, and I'll be nice to you, it's one of the Ulfric episodes, as an Easter egg, one of my characters from my original Let's Play, so back in like 2013, I tried a Let's Play and cancelled it a bit in, and one of the characters from that original Let's Play is in this new full complete one, in the background of an Ulfric episode. There is an Easter egg like that. And the reason why, by the way, is, yes, Ulfric is on a totally different account, and the reason he's on a different account is so that I can show off certain things about expansions later, and so yeah, that is all planned out for way down the line. That I hadn't figured out in the notepad here, but when I got to make an Ulfric, I realized that was something that I would be doing. So yeah, some of you have thought, oh, it would be really cool to have all 5 characters playing together, and I get it, it would. That was the idea of my 2013 Let's Play. Every character would be on a different account, and they'd all be played and piloted together, but that involves really messy stuff with, first of all, I have to buy new accounts that have anonymized email addresses that I'm happy to share across the internet for other people to play simultaneously with me. And then not only do I have to spend all of that real world money, and I'm not a very wealthy person. I would have to buy all of those, but also I'd have to beat the game on all of it. So a lot of you have very flippantly been saying, "Oh, do it for the final dungeon." I know that would be fun, but it's easy to forget how much stuff there is to play and to get through. Not only that, but they'd be new accounts, so I wouldn't have level tomes. I'd have to fully level to 80 on every single one. I wouldn't have, because I mean, you could technically do it on free-to-play accounts, let me be clear, but if you bought an expansion, maybe you wouldn't have to level to 80 because you'd get the level 80 boost, and that's perfectly fair. But then, like, there wouldn't be any skins, so I'd have to buy the cultural armor that they were most recently wearing, or manufacture a way to get them back into basic gear. It's just icky. Or you might say, oh, give the character name to someone else's account. Yeah, but then I have to delete the actual people we've been playing on, and I lose the playtime stats, and I lose the death stats, and that would just feel bad, and I'd have to trust the people. And do I even have 4 people I can trust who have fully understood this series and watched it? In truth, I'm quite an introverted guy. The answer is no, I'm not in that kind of connection with all those people. One idea I almost entertained was having spoof characters called, like, not Ulfric Romkerson, but this time it's Ulfric Romkerson with double S there, right? Like, to almost look like the characters and fake it. And I was vaguely interested in that, but I saw one of you guys in the community already made spoofs of all my LP tunes. So, yeah. So, yes, it would be really cool to do the dungeon series where everyone's playing together like that. But I resolved at the start of this whole project not to go down that road, because that's what killed the 2013 series. The 2013 series was for that, and it rapidly got kind of nuts. So that's why that's not a thing. And I know the perfect Guild Wars LP would be that, and I'd love to see someone try it. But I've done the best that I can do. So yeah. Then you got the final episode, which has a little bit more notation, and some of this I actually wrote in just the most recent days, to tell you the truth. The one framers showing Brack's dialogue. As I've already mentioned. We got the Vigil Sword. So this is beautiful, isn't it? That audio, I think that just encapsulates kind of the magic and the spirit of Guild Wars in a way. I know that togetherness is the actual spirit of Guild Wars. One thing I never mentioned in the commentary for the finale is the last thing Traherne says is, I don't know how we'll beat the future dragons, but I do know one thing, we'll do it together. That is Guild Wars right there. We will do it together. And that's a cool little thing for Traherne to end on. But I really liked that dialogue. I really liked that. So, you know, I'm not going to bang on about all the creative decisions I made when it came to making the finale. A lot of this I knew I wanted to do. You guys can scroll through this if you want. We had the stats montage at the end, which I think I've talked about quite well. It was kind of weird opening with the launch trailer because it's live action. And it feels a bit weird and a bit cringy, honestly, that live action trailer. We don't really like it that much, I think, honestly, as a community generally. But, it was weird, and I liked that. I wanted to set up, look, it's the finale. It's something epic going on here. So maybe it's okay to have a weird trailer at the start, you know. Like I say here, it's an interesting contrast to the rest of everything else. Pays off on the precedent the final episode is special, I have written. Hall of Monuments. So here's a fun thing, actually. This was not originally planned to be in the final. What I was actually doing in those early days with Lion's Arch, There was a lot going on with Lion's Arch. A lot of data mining to get audio of the original city. There's that cutscene of the original city that you can't really explore. I was splicing in as much as possible in substitute for vistas for the Disneyland Lion's Arch that people playing now. A lot going on with Lion's Arch episodes. One of the things I really wanted to do was every time we came back to Lion's Arch, which was many times in those, starting points, every time we do that, I wanted to show off a new feature. Okay, this time we're going to look at World versus World. Okay, this time we're going to look at PvP. Okay, this time we're going to look at novelties, or this time we're going to... And that is what I did. One of the features I wanted to do, and was scheduled in the last one, it was going to be on our last visit to Lion's Arch, was going to be the Hall of Monuments and the Script Cave. But I never did it in the end. I don't remember why I didn't. I might have forgotten on that episode. It might have been the episodes were too long. It might have been any of that stuff. But and as I speak to you now, I actually can't remember our last visit to Lion's Arch right now. I cannot remember. And that would have been something I'd want to accent and say, no, look, this is the last one. So yeah, that's when I was originally going to do the Hall of Monuments. Once I'd missed that, which was, 70 episodes before the end of the series or whatever it was. Nah, not that many episodes. It was a lot of episodes before. As soon as I realized I'd missed that, I knew I wanted to do it at the end instead. Either at the end or on the Norn, but the Norn's hall was empty, so... Because mountains would have been the idea. Ideas for the montages. Copy-pasted text that I found ages ago of the missing mail. The other mail I actually still had in-game. I showed you 2 cut mails there. You can see my ideas here for how the montages are supposed to work. I'm not going to read this out because you've just seen the finale and you know how that all went in the end, I guess. Okay, so here as well. No, this was a thing. One of our characters can decide to take on the final mission. That's all faked. I never read a single comment from any of you about who you wanted to do the final mission. I shot the penultimate episode, and then I shot the ultimate episode back-to-back, pretty much, over, a few days. The whole point, and I'm not sure this really came out as well as I wanted it to. The idea was, oh, you guys get to pick, cool. And then we load in, and then the choice is made. And the idea of the choice, the faked choice, is that it would probably disappoint people. That was... And I don't mean to be rude to Bract. I love playing it on Bract. I really did. But the idea was... I guessed people would want to see Tyrix because he's a badass and he is actually the oldest character since Casey died, right? The earliest character since Casey died. Or they'd want Caraflower just because people connected with her so much. Or they'd want Ulfric because he'd recently been played and he was new and maybe you'd feel he'd want more spotlight. My thinking was people would want anything but Bract. Bract would be the bottom of the list. Also, I think people just don't generally like seeing Asura too much. So you've got all of that going on, and what I wanted to do was pick Bract to generally disappoint people, and then the idea was to very quickly reveal, oh no, hold on, it's constantly glitching, and we're seeing everyone all at once. It's actually a super edit of all the players playing together, which is as close as I can get to it being all 5 playing it cooperatively, without actually doing all 5 playing cooperatively. That was the idea. But I don't think I did it that well because, first of all, it takes quite a while for it to become apparent that it's a super edit. And even, I think I snip Ulfric. Ulfric appears randomly, suddenly, after we say we're picking Bract, which is supposed to tip you off that this isn't totally normal. But I'm not sure I did enough. And it was very difficult to do as well because, what I could have done is play the first fifth of the dungeon on Bract, and then literally log out and play the second fifth of the dungeon on Caraflower, and then log out and play and do it like... And what that would have done is, that would have meant that the commentary was talking about the skills of the characters, and it would have been really, really coherently unified, like the character I'm playing with the whatever. But that sounded really weird because then you lose like just in terms of recording, the broader perspective of how the dungeon's going, because from my perspective it would be very stop start, and I might not be able to enjoy myself and really get into the game and laugh and be excited and be sincere about it if, when you finally see me beating Zaitan in the episode, it's actually my 4th time doing it that day. That would suck for me, and I would end up feeling like stuff's being fake. I wanted something a bit more authentic, so the decision I went with in the end was to play it once, and all the commentary is my first time through. That's all on Bract. And what I tried to do is not talk about the specifics of Brack's skills, like, oh, we're using a flamethrower, and oh, we're using orbital bombardment right now. Not talk about his skills too much, so that afterwards I could then play the dungeon 4 times, record it 4 times, and in editing just keep splicing in seamlessly the other characters, and it can chop and change a lot. That was the idea, and in that way it would work. And once I realized I wanted to do a lot of splicing, I decided not to do the glitchy edits, because then there'd just be too much glitching and it would feel weird, and we're kind of moving on from that idea anyway. So... yeah, what I said about the GS before. So then the super edit kind of ended up as it was, but I feel like it was still too Bracked heavy. Like, all the dialogue was Bracked, because timing the dialogue windows was just a nightmare. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm curious what people think about that one, and what the response will be with that one. But, yeah, that was the idea. And that's why I was happy to lie and fake the, oh, you're choosing the hero. Because it doesn't matter. You're getting it all. Don't worry. So, yes, that was fake, but it was to surprise you all. And hopefully it paid off. I really felt this was important to remark it was all free to play. There's actually a ton of things that I really wanted to say on that series, on that finale. There's a lot of little bits of commentary snipping in. There's a lot to get through about the credit scene and War Master Hargrove and all of that just had to line up perfectly so that when the credits end, I was there ready for Wozmak's reappearance and stuff. And it was really difficult to do the outro to the series. It really was, because it's, you know, it's a year of my life. And one of the things I was going to do on the stats montage, this here, which is what I used to do in Guild Wars 1, by the way. So this is looking back at Guild Wars 1 stuff. What I wanted to do was also have a YouTube stats bit. How many videos was the series? How long was the series? What was the watch time, the viewership, stuff like that. But when I started going down that rabbit hole, I just thought it felt a bit tacky. Like, it's not about me or the YouTube channel. It's about the game, and it's about the show and the presentation. It's not about, ooh, I got X subscribers while doing this. Like, that stuff makes me want to vomit. So then I kind of stepped away from it, and I decided not to. Maybe number of videos would have been fun. And where those stats would have appeared would have been in the super speed original trailer, which I put at the end. You know, that I bookended the series with again. That we start with that original trailer, and we pretty much end with that original trailer, but in super speed form. I was going to put those stats there, but in the end, I just thought it worked really well without those stats and listening to Fear Not This Night. But yeah, all those kinds of little things and all those stats, I really just wanted to make sure we're in. This home instance thing was really nice as well. I love the way this worked. The idea that we're going home. And I tried to have that in the commentary. Oh, it's time for us to go home. And what do? We go to the home instance. This actually was originally going to be a whole section of the final episode where we were going to do Hall of Monuments. Then we were going to do the mails and the Edge of Destiny and the trailers and all that stuff. Then we were going to do the dungeon. And between the dungeon and the celebration, we were going to go tour our home instances, because now everything's done and you get to see all the NPCs that have come back. And remember, one of the biggest points of the personal story for the devs was the home instance and that technology to make it feel like your choices were permanent, as we see with the orphanage and the hospital. But the devs basically failed at it. It's not very good at all. Ulfric's home instance, first of all, really isn't that interesting. And it was way too weird of a pace breaker. So I actually got kind of worried for a while. I was like, crap, how am I going to do the home instance thing? That needs to be there. That's the truth of the personal story, isn't it? And then I realized, hold on, the stats montage can be kind of a in the background, us going home to our home instance, seeing where Scholar Inkblood and Amphib appears each time, and, you know, all the Peridor and all the people that we've met throughout our adventures coming back. I think that's a beautiful way of ending things, exploring the home instance. In my Guild Wars 1 series, it was just us running across, like, generic landscapes, which is what, until almost the final day, I was planning to do. But then when I realized the home instance thing, that came out really awesome. So everyone's back home and sort of seeing what they did and who they met, and, you know, seeing the ogres meeting up at Tyrix's place and stuff. And yeah, I was happy to show the deaths at the end in the stats montage as well, because, you know, I'm not shying away from... I'm not actually trying to lie to anyone. I'm an honest person. My characters were dying all the time. It was just a tool for the storytelling, right? The permadeath thing. And by putting that blatantly on the screen, I hope I'm kind of just showing people, yeah, you know... And also, I don't really intend for the permadeath thing to be much of a thing going forwards. The game actually gets challenging enough and has stakes and is a decent game going forwards that a lot of that stuff isn't necessary. But I guess that's the future. So yeah, and then I'll just leave this quiet for now. But yes, that was Casey in Lorna's Pass exiting the underworld, honoring the sneaky thing I'd put in the Claw Island episode. But here what I did was I totted up everything and how long I thought everything would take. So 8 videos, 11, and then when the dungeons are included. Dungeons were originally going to be a single video affairs, but they ended up being perfect, pretty much all of them, as 2 videos. Except Ara. Ara was all 1 video, obviously, but it's like movie length and basically 2. And yeah, look, you see here, I was going to do a bonus Infinity Ball arc, and I was going to do a bonus Malik arc. They never ended up a thing, though. And I'm not sure when or how I'll figure those out. Here, bonus Norn. I mean, they're not bonus, though, in the end. And then Victory or Death is two videos I originally had planned there. But yeah, 108, and it ended up around 122 or something. And there you go. It may surprise you, or it may not surprise you, that my behind the scenes is about as long as the finale was. 2 hours, 40 minutes. There you go, guys. That's the LP. It's been a hell of a ride. Can I just say, as a bit more personal now, a thank you to those of you who were in the comments a lot throughout the series. Especially some of you. Now, I'm not going to actually name names, because if I do that, I'm going to forget someone, and they're going to feel really bad, and I'm going to feel really bad for having forgotten. So we won't do that. But there are some of you, you know who you are, who commented on, like, every video, or most videos, and especially some of you who did walls of text. You guys are amazing, honestly. As the viewership dwindles on a series like this, really the reason I'm doing it is for the fan base and to feel like some connection to you guys and to complete what I started and all that. And so those kinds of comments where you guys just give me your impressions and thoughts and feelings as the story goes on is really what made the entire thing so worth it to me. I know it sounds like a cheesy thing that people would just say, but it's so true. Thank you. The more you typed, the better as well, right? Like, there was no such thing as a comment that was too long. Like, every video is coming up on an hour. If that was a live stream, you'd get heaps of commentary on, like, every little moment. But most people just leave a little bit. I don't mind if you just write over and over and over again all these messages. It's amazing. And to anyone who has been watching in future years as well and leaves comments, it's always my favorite thing to go back. I still get people commenting saying Demetra or Demetra, right? I still get people saying that, and that makes me so happy. And, like, every message, the people that really came, and I know it's pathetic, but, like, people just, like, giving that positive feedback and supporting the videos in any way, it makes it feel really, it makes me happy, because it's going to be, you know, it's an aging MMO that this might be one of the last chances a large community really gets together and celebrates the personal story as we have here and talks about it as we have here, piecemeal. This is kind of what I want for the audiobook series. You know, people actually get to look back at these things and shine a spotlight on them. And that doesn't happen without your comments. So that really helped me enjoy this so much more. And yeah, as I do this video, by the way, the finale hasn't actually launched. I'm watching the premiere. I'm trying the new YouTube feature for premiering stuff right now, and there's lots of you waiting days before the finale is even there, just waiting there in chat, and I can't wait to see whether that's really fun. But yeah, so there you go. That's the personal story. There is maybe one more discussion video warranted, which is an actual criticism of the game, the story quality, the gameplay and stuff. But I'm not joking. I've actually written pages and page-long manifesto in my Google Drive to do with this in the past. That would be, like, very, very, very long. Like, triple, quadruple the length of this video if I wanted to do it properly. And I don't know what it's worth, me just throwing a little video out saying, oh, the personal story is not good for this basic reason, this basic reason, this basic reason. Anyone with any semblance of a critical eye can watch my Let's Play and will know where the story is boring and where it's failing and where it's not doing its job. And we don't even know if the devs have any plans to update or change any of this stuff anyway. So, you know, it's shouting into a vacuum as far as I'm concerned. Maybe with the layoffs and a refocus on the game, they will realize that this stuff, these formative experiences, should get a bit of hammer and nails. But who knows? All right, and the last thing, I did promise myself I'd mention this video, so I may as well now, is, yeah, if you guys do like projects like this, and if you want to support me for ones upcoming, I am on Patreon. Patreon shrank quite considerably throughout this LP series, so maybe this isn't the kind of thing I should focus on. But yeah, that really is kind of what funds my life and allows me to pursue this cool stuff. I've got a lot of cool ideas going forward, and none of this could kind of exist without that. So, number one, thank you to everyone on Patreon, and number two, If you are at all inclined, please do remember there's a link in the description. And hey, you can get early access to videos, so that's something, right? In fact, I mentioned Patreon once in the whole series in Bloodtide Coast, and that was actually pretty good. I remember a couple of people did join. So hey, maybe the early access videos are more enticing than I give credit. All right, so there you go. Thanks very much, guys. Once again, it's been another long one, but that's behind the scenes. If you've spent hundreds of hours watching the series, maybe you find watching this pretty interesting too. Next up will be the dungeon series, and we'll be going on. Cheers. I'll see you for that next time.